We have a slightly different live stream setup this time.
Yeah. I didn't even check that. Let me see.
We're still streaming to the audio channel, basically, like the Icecast MP3 server. Still streaming to that. But our wonderful application I use over here, Audio Hijack, a while back added support to also stream to RTMP, RTSP, whatever the streaming protocols are that you can stream to Twitch and stuff, or YouTube Live or whatever else. And so they have this thing. So I figured for high volume WWDC season, this would be a good opportunity to test out one of these. And between YouTube Live and Twitch, the reason I went with Twitch is because, to the best of my knowledge, YouTube Live requires you to create the video entry in their CMS before you can stream, and you have to do that each time. You create a new one each time. Whereas Twitch, you just have a channel, and you can just put in your stream key as the authentication token in the streaming app, and you can just hit go whenever you want, and you don't have to do a new setup each episode or each time you want to hit go. So for my purposes, Twitch was way easier for this purpose, even though we don't actually intend to use Twitch as a major platform for any other reason. But for this particular purpose, it seemed to go well there. So I do intend to use this setup next week during WWDC to provide extra capacity, which is the whole reason I did it in the first place. Because typically WWDC shows usually really max out our live stream server, and some people can't get through or it drops the connection or something, so the Twitch version should be much more reliable. I should note also this is an audio-only stream. It's generating some kind of basic visualization. Also, that's also a built-in feature of Audio Hijack, but it's not showing our faces or anything, so you're not missing a video version of it. So anyway, so I'm going to be doing this next week, and if this actually, proves to be useful, maybe we'll do more of it in the future. But it'll at least be this week and next week.
All right, let's do some follow-up because we probably have a big episode. I wanted to briefly mention and say thank you to those who signed up for Fastmail using my referral, because this is the first of the month, and that's when Fastmail reports in on your referral earnings. And I am happy to say I now have a year of free Fastmail, baby. Woo! I'm excited. So
pretty soon you'll have that big payout that you'll be like, oh, I gotta have them pay me out because it's too much. I'll never use it in 100 years.
If I could only be so lucky.
Oh, that should be how we fund your XDR. Even though I know that joke's kind of over because you got the other monitor, but
right.
It would be kind of a great way to somehow to accumulate $5,000 of referral credit on Fastmail.
That would be amazing.
Why don't we just get Fastmail to be a sponsor again?
That would also be a much easier route.
But I feel like when somebody's a sponsor, that's like your salary, you're getting paid to do your job. Whereas affiliate money feels like free money. It's it feels like fun money,
Yep, I agree.
I wasn't expecting. I didn't do anything for this. I just this just arrived in my inbox.
Indeed. And so it arrived in my inbox this morning that I got $63.50 in referral cash. So that means I have next year, because I've already paid for this year, but I have next year for free. So keep it coming, folks. That's www.caseylist.com/fastmail is a redirect to my referral page if you are interested. And all self-serving plugging aside, I am still extremely happy with Fastmail. I'm very glad that I switched. I have been really pleased with it, and that is the truth. I'm not saying that because I've been instructed to. I'm not saying that because I just want free service. That really, honestly, is the truth. So if you're interested at all,
working towards the XDR,
something like that,
$3 at a time.
$3 at a time, baby. But no, I really have been enjoying it. And even if I can't afford an XDR, I do still have this LG 5K to my right-hand side, and it would be much nicer if it was a second studio display. So, you could always do that. So atp.fm/join and caselist.com/fastmail, all the referrals. We got some extremely important feedback from a bunch of different people, so I can't cite just one. This is, I think, mostly for Marco, actually. The Price is Right is available for free, at least in the States, potentially elsewhere, on Pluto TV, which is something I'd never heard of. No sign up is required, or so we were told. I did not confirm this. And it is all the Bob Barker era, which honestly, I don't know how well that holds up at this point, but nevertheless, it is what is probably considered to be the golden age of Price is Right. So should Adam fall under the weather again, you can go to Pluto.tv and you can check out The Price is Right.
But it's got ads on it, right? And it doesn't have period-specific ads, which would be cool. Well,
that would be very cool.
Slightly more cool. Instead, it's got modern ads, which are not cool.
Yeah, and it has modern, I think bargain basement streaming service ads, which are all, it's like these are not, things that are fun or novel to watch in any way. So I actually did go and watch a few minutes of it, and it was interesting. I didn't know about this entire service, Pluto TV, and I heard also there's like a Roku channel, but I think that's just this. It seems like there's a few different front ends that are just all going to this service. But it was certainly interesting watching, because what I saw was a version of it that was even from before I watched it. It was like Bob Barker when his hair was still brown, or at least it was colored brown. But it was like an old version, I think from the 70s, before my time, and of course he was being kind of a jerk to the contestants, and it was like, oh yeah, I'm not sure how well this holds up, but it was very entertaining to see.
All right, we got some relatively long feedback, but I found it to be absolutely fascinating from an anonymous person that works for an Apple Fitness Plus competitor. And I'm going to read a lot, but not all of this verbatim. And again, I just found this to be absolutely fascinating. So this was with regard to the Apple Plus Studio Tour that I was embittered that wasn't really a studio tour at all, and how they go about making these videos. And so this individual writes, after taping a show, from the control room comes what is called the line cut. This line cut is not the show that will be distributed. It is more like a blueprint, a reference for the editors to work with. Some directors even request their audio recorded as a separate track so they can give directions to the editor, like, don't use this camera, or resize this shot. It's like having your own private DVD commentary track. The line cut goes to the assistant editors. They recreate the cut using the raw footage from the camera cards. It's a rather automated process, although depending on the show's setup, sometimes it's done manually. You want to work with the uncompressed footage and no color correction, since there will be a proper color pass once the cut is locked. The line cut is both compressed and has a temporary color filter. So once the cut is rebuilt as a multicam project, it goes to the editor. Why an editor still? Well, like you mentioned in the podcast, many times we have to correct mistakes, replacing segments that had to be reshot or cut around smaller blunders. But there is a lot more than that. For instance, even with the best crew, there tends to be a slight delay between the director calling a camera and the shot actually changing. This is not a big deal for an award show, but with a workout video, you might have missed the beginning of a move or the trainer pointing out something that is very important and could prevent users from injury. And there's also some creative stuff. Perhaps the director called a shot and then it turns out that one of the other cameras found something much better. The process is more involved than it might seem, and often the show is very different after it goes through editing. So I thought that was all fascinating, that even if they're doing kind of a screw it, we'll do it live sort of thing, they still will go back in most cases and re-edit everything using this kind of quasi-director's commentary as a blueprint, which was super cool. This is tangentially related. This is Casey talking. This is tangentially related, but I found it to also be completely wild. Well, sorry, I didn't want it to sound that was a very awkward turn of phrase. I didn't want it to we'll fix it in post here. Marco, please use a different line for that. But no, that's your director's commentary right there, baby.
Oh, yeah.
No, I didn't want it. I felt like it sounded like I was still reading verbatim, and in an awkward way only I could. I've ruined everything. All right, so this was a little tidbit that I also found interesting that's tangentially related. I had no idea this was a thing. So now this is no longer Casey talking, and this is back to the individual.
Isn't it?
Shush. Just go with it. Just go with it.
This is Casey Actual. We all learned the meaning of that from Battlestar Galactica. I've already forgotten.
No,
I'd never seen it.
What? You've never seen Battlestar Galactica? What?
You're gonna have to wait for Casey to come back. I'm sorry. This is the feedback person.
I don't understand. I don't know how you're still surprising me. I'd started to say, hey, Casey's seen some stuff. He's seen things. Not like people say, never seen Battlestar Galactica. All right, fine.
By the way, about the remote work thing, in case you are not familiar with the technology, it is rather amazing. The Mac Pro, which I use, is in some data center miles away, and you connect to it via the regular internet using a little terminal, which happens to be an Amulet Hotkey DXZ4. It is indistinguishable from having a local computer. We live in the future. So that was all that this person said. This is Casey talking. That was all that this person said. And so I had to figure out what the crap is an Amulet Hotkey DXZ4. And so, of course, I went digging about and I found their marketing site or whatever, which was very enterprisey and not entirely helpful. But I eventually got to the following little snippet. So it's a box. and it's PCOIP, which I presume means, personal computer over IP. And so from their site, the PCOIP host includes USB audio and video from the host, and then encodes USB audio and video from the host, and then compresses and encrypts the data for transmission across standard IP networks to the Zero client. The Zero client then decrypts and decompresses the data and delivers it to the desktop monitors and peripherals. The Zero client also passes user-generated USB and audio data to the PCOIP host. Only the display pixels are sent to the client, so no sensitive data ever reaches the client. So this is a box that has 2 network cables, 2 RJ45 jacks for redundancy purposes. Also available, gentlemen, 2 SFP jacks, which are fiber connectors, just in case someone was bananas enough to use fiber in the home, but who would ever do that? Am I right? It can support, it has four HDMI ports, so it can do 4 1920 by 1200 displays, or 2 3440 by 1440 displays, and it has 4 USB-A ports for like keyboards and microphones and things of that nature. So this is a little box that you plug it in your house, and it's basically like you're using a Mac Pro that literally is miles and miles and miles away, but it's as though you're sitting in front of it. And I was talking to a couple different people that do work like this, and they said that in modern times, it is nearly indistinguishable from being in front of the computer, which to me is utterly bananas, because I'll use VNC to go from the downstairs to the upstairs, and it is very distinguishable from sitting in front of the computer. So I found this to be absolutely fascinating. Maybe it's just me.
Did you ever use a X Windows system when you were in school, or was that out of fashion by the time you got there?
I did some, but not a ton. And when I did, so when I think of X Window, I just think of a graphical user interface like a GNOME or what was the other one that was popular?
KDE.
Yes, thank you. I think of that as X Windows, but are you talking about like the more traditional definition where you can have like Windows running remotely but shown locally? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's another way to use it's a way to use a GUI on another computer that's not the one you're sitting in front of. You're sitting in front of an extern, but the much more powerful computer that is elsewhere, I mean, maybe across the country, maybe in a different building, is where you're actually running your things. And I mean, and even Next Step had something similar to this. And I'm not quite sure how X Windows does the thing, but the way Next used to do things is with display PostScript. So instead of sending pixel buffers across the wire, because we didn't really have bandwidth for that back in the day, like VNC was slow or ugly because it would like massively compress everything. It would send the PostScript command. PostScript is just like it's a programming language. So you could send an ASCII text and it would send the PostScript commands over to the XTerm. The XTerm would run a PostScript engine and execute those. So it was sort of a lossless compression. Instead, rather than sending the pixels that get rendered, you send the rendering commands. I forget what they call it, NX hosting, or I forget what it was called the Next Step. And I think X11 might have done something similar with sending commands, but honestly, I don't know how it worked. But anyway, this is what this reminded me of, like sitting in front of a computer that's not the big fancy computer, using a bigger, fancier computer with a GUI.
But again, there's no local computer involved here. Like, I mean, I guess strictly speaking, this Amulet hotkey thing is a computer, but there's no like traditional computer at your local station.
I mean, the XTerm was also not really a computer, but also, they're Turing complete machines that have networking and do a thing. It's just that they're very small nowadays. But the XTerms had no, not much power. I don't think they had any local storage. They just had a big Ethernet port in the back and enough compute to do the job they were asked to do.
Yeah. I just thought this was really wild and really cool. I remember, I've told this story many times on the show, but it just makes me think of it when you bring up like VNC and stuff. I remember vividly the first time I saw someone use VNC. I was sitting in my dorm room, and a friend from like way on the other end of the hallway came into my room, and he was like, "Oh, can I ask you something real quick?" And then he asked me a question, and then he just sat down to chill out for a little bit, and then all of a sudden he says, "Oh shoot, I left my music playing in my room. Can I use your computer for a second?" And I was like, "What?" Yeah. And so he goes to some website that looked like, I think it was like an IP address or something like that. And, with a port number tacked on the end. And all of a sudden he's looking at another computer. And I was like, what is this magic? What is happening here? And sure enough, he paused the music in his room from my room. And it was amazing. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. This was like late in 2000, maybe early 2001, something like that. And I just thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was amazing.
But that was the intention. I guarantee you that was no accident. Oh, whoops.
Probably not.
I'm visiting a fellow nerd. I'm a nerd, and I accidentally left my music playing. Oh, excuse me. Let me show off. Yeah, that was totally no accident. We are sponsored this week by Iodyne, introducing the all-new All-SSD Pro Data, the fastest Thunderbolt storage for M1 Macs. Conventional storage forces a trade-off between big, slow hard disks or small, fast SSDs, and without redundancy, you have no protection. Now with Pro Data, Iodyne is delivering revolutionary storage for pro, desktops, and workgroups. Pro Data is the first all-SSD Thunderbolt RAID device that combines 12 NVMe SSDs and 8 Thunderbolt ports into a single elegant form factor. I gotta say, it looks incredibly cool. Pro Data is also incredibly powerful, with storage performance up to 5 gigabytes per second. For the first time, multiple Thunderbolt connections can be combined to boost performance using Iodyne's breakthrough Thunderbolt NVMe multipathing. And all your digital assets are seamlessly protected with transactional RAID 6, checksums, and enterprise-grade encryption. Pro Data features a sleek industrial design that fits as well in a laptop bag or a DIT cart as it does on your desk. It's shipping now in 12 and 24 terabyte capacities, up to 3 times the size of the largest built-in Mac SSDs. And with the flexibility of Thunderbolt daisy chaining, many Pro Data devices can be connected to a single Mac for nearly infinite expansion. Pro Data even supports connecting up to 4 computers simultaneously to it and dividing its unique SSD storage pool into distinct containers with configurable passwords, encryption keys, RAID levels, and file system formats. Using Iodyne's storage handoff technology, containers can be handed off in real time between collaborating Macs with just one click. Supercharge your setup with the fastest Thunderbolt storage for M1 Macs and the fastest Thunderbolt RAID array, Iodyne Pro Data. To learn more, visit Iodyne.com. That's Iodyne, Iodyne.com. Thank you so much to Iodyne Pro Data for sponsoring our show.
John, you discovered a WWDC in-person info/schedule/stuff, in menu even, and I saw this via Paul Hudson. Maybe you'd seen it from there or from somewhere else, but we have a little bit of details for those that are attending.
Yeah, this is the lottery that they ran. Basically said, hey, do you want to come to California and watch some videos with us? And the interesting thing is they asked people to sign up to enter this lottery, not knowing much more than that you're going to have to come to California. You're going to come to Apple Park, whatever that means. You have a random chance of doing it. And we're going to watch the keynote video. And I think maybe they said State of the Union. They said videos, plural. But now I think the people who won this lottery and who entered and won this lottery now started to get their sort of itineraries. And so a couple of people tweeted pictures of it in typical Apple fashion. It's just a bunch of white line art on a black background. But I'll just go through the steps here. There's check-in at 7 a.m., Apple Developer Open House also at 7 a.m. and the locations are interesting. So the check-in is Apple Park Visitor Center. We know where that is. We talked about it in the previous show. Apple Developer Center is that building that we thought was going to be whatever Tantau Road, or I don't remember the name of that thing. Talked about it in a previous show. Breakfast is in Apple Park Cafe Max. So that is the big cafeteria thing with the 2 giant glass doors that's in the Ring building. So if you won this lottery, you are going to go to the Ring building and you're going to eat in that big cafeteria thing. And like we talked about a couple shows back, some anonymous person was telling us about events where they had like friends and family come to Apple Park and they had them basically corralled into the Cafe Max area and some other adjoining areas so they could use the bathrooms that are attached to Cafe Max and everything. So that's where everyone will be. Then it says time for the keynote at 10 a.m. and the location for that just says Apple Park. Who knows what that means? Are they going to, again, people keep thinking they're going to go in the middle of the Ring and there's going to be a screen set up under the Rainbow stage. Who knows? But they will, breakfast is inside the Ring. So it makes sense that the video watching would be somewhere near there as well. Lunch is back to Cafe Max. State of the Union, again, back to Apple Park, whatever that means. Meet the teams in Cafe Max. I don't know. They're going to have a bunch of engineering teams hanging out at tables and you get to go talk to them. And then there's a bunch of tours all happening at the same time. You can tour Apple Park Hills. You can tour the fitness center area. Casey would be interested in that. Get a real tour of the fitness center area. Or you can tour Cafe Max. I mean, you've already been there for like, meals and meeting the team. So I guess you can see how they make pizzas and put them in the fancy boxes.
Yeah, that kind of seems like the overflow option. That's like you didn't get into the other two, so you'll fall back to.
Anyway, and then Apple Design Awards at 4:30, location listed as Apple Park.
This is interesting.
So seems like a full day. They have a lot of activities for everyone to do.
Yeah. This implies to me, and I'm reading heavily between the lines, but I think they're trying to keep this as open air as they reasonably can for the big groups. Because if you think about it, Cafe Max, like you had mentioned, John, has, from what I've seen, I've never seen it in person, but from what I've gathered, there's two humongous doors that open incredibly wide and get a ton of airflow through, I would assume, through there. And plus, doesn't the ring have like natural heating and cooling such that there's like a ton of airflow anyway, or so we were told, something like that?
Yeah, we should find a picture of this because we keep saying doors, but they're not doors. The whole side of the building moves. It's like a 4-story high piece of glass. The whole side of the building just opens up, and it basically becomes a pass-through. Like, you imagine a section of the ring that only has the roof on it. It's kind of like that.
Yeah. And so that you could claim as quasi outdoors, and then they just say Apple Park. So if it is indeed somewhere in the center of the ring, well, that's certainly outdoors. And then, that means everything is to some reasonable definition outdoors. And if you're going to do something where a bunch of people from a bunch of places are gathering, if it were me, I would want as much of this to be outside as possible. And then if you're doing something inside, it would only be in smaller groups. Like if you wanted to tour the fitness center, which is itself presumably a very large space, but still indoors, you would probably want a subset of those that are there doing that. So this seems to me like they're trying to play this as reasonably and safely as possible. We'll see what ends up actually happening. But I approve in principle as someone who is still a nervous Ned about COVID stuff because Michaela can't get her shot yet. This seems like as good as one can hope. I don't know. But there's a menu too.
Yes, that's the most important part. They're not going to get boxed lunches, guys. I guess you're at Cafe Max and you can get freshly made food, but there's 2 menus. I guess it's kind of like a dinner menu and a breakfast menu. So here's the most interesting thing about the dinner menu. There's lots of options. I'm sure they're all very good, but they have kind of an all caps like category above each one. And the categories, I feel like this is Apple's sort of stating what they believe are the major categories of food, kind of like the 6 genders. Here's what they are, right? The major categories of food are vegan, Italian, grill, Pangea, Indian, Pacific Rim, Romana, Latin, and 2 desserts. Yeah. So, that covers, that's the whole world of food. Vegan, Italian, grill, Pangea, Indian, Pacific Rim, Romana, Latin, dessert. I don't think we missed anything, did we? Because Pangea is everything. Like, it's a giant mega continent that included all the other continents. So technically, anything not covered by the other categories is covered by Pangea.
Wait, I'm a little curious, though. The Pangea option is salmon. Mm-hmm. Why would they name the fish dish after a large landmass?
I don't know. Most of the Earth was water when Pangea was around. You just had the big giant continent, and maybe there was salmon in that water. And it seems unlikely.
I think they're river fish anyway. I don't know that much about fish.
Yeah, well, they go back and forth.
But still, it seemed like a weird thing to have the one seafood dish be named after a large landmass.
Yeah, and so the vegan thing is kung pao tofu and vegetables, Italian lasagna, grill is barbecue brisket, Pangea seared salmon, Indian is chicken tikka masala, Pacific Rim is Thai green chicken curry, Romana is Romana quattro, that was a pizza, carne asada burrito is the Italian, and then 2 desserts are dark chocolate panna cotta and vegan mixed berry cobbler. This is a very fancy sounding menu, and assuming this food it's got to be better than the box lunches. So I feel like these people are getting a more premium experience.
Would you eat the lasagna?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Okay, John, how do you feel about house-made pasta sheets layered with bolognese, bechamel, I'm probably pronouncing this all wrong, Parmigiano, served over tomato sauce? How do you feel about that, John?
I have had bad luck with Italian food in California. California's a big place. I have been to only a tiny, tiny portion of it and then mostly had box lunches. So it's just not a judgment on whether, an entire state. All I'm saying is that for the tiny, tiny amount of experience I've had in California, I have not had good luck with Italian food. I feel like I would probably go with something that would have a higher chance of being good. So maybe the burrito, which the area is the few tiny areas in California that I have been to are known for having good burritos. I feel like there's a higher chance of that one being good. I probably would not pick a lasagna.
A burrito filled with carne asada, Spanish rice, black beans, pico de gallo, and mozzarella cheese, served with red and green salsa and corn tortilla chips. That does sound solid.
That sounds a little weird. I don't know. I don't think I would pick the Italian out of this choice.
I would absolutely choose barbecue brisket. Slow roasted beef brisket glazed with our house-made barbecue sauce, served with 3 cheese, macaroni, and cheese. Even if the brisket stinks, the mac and cheese is probably going to be passable at worst. So, sold.
Do hyphens cost a lot of money in California?
Wow, you're such a grump.
What should be hyphenated here?
Like every other word.
I mean, these have to be like standard dishes in Cafe Max. So just ask Apple people what's good that they make there out of this choice. It's just they'd know which one to pick.
Yeah, I think I would see the Pacific Rim. The Thai green chicken curry sounds good. I also might go with the vegan kung pao tofu and vegetables. To me, for whatever it's worth, I haven't been to the Ring yet, but we did go to the visitor center there, and they had like a little coffee shop there, and I remember that being very good. And also, in years ago, we were lucky enough to go to the Infinite Loop campus at one point, and I ate at Cafe Max there, and that was excellent.
Yeah, it really was.
And so I'm hoping that they've continued the tradition with the new building, and they probably have. Like their record on the food they serve their employees, as far as I know, is pretty solid. So I would expect this to all be pretty good, really.
Yeah, I went to, this was not with the two of y'all, but I went to, I think it's called Alves. I probably pronounced that wrong as well, but it was, I was told it was like a rough draft for what became Cafe Max in the Ring, and that was super fancy as well, and that was really good to my recollection. So, yeah, to me, I would do barbecue brisket, maybe the seared salmon served over roasted vegetable, I almost said quinoa from the commercial, quinoa salad. Did you ever see that commercial? Quinoa. What is a quinoa anyway? But that's probably what I would choose. But no, I mean, this looks pretty decent. Now, however, I have also not spent an overabundance of time in California, and I think I can still be so bold as to say finding a decent, nay, passable bagel in the entire state of California is challenging from everything I've understood, both from locals and from my own experience. John, how do you feel about the San Daniele prosciutto bagel? Everything bagel, San Daniele prosciutto, mascarpone cream, heirloom tomato, and micro horseradish.
Yeah, I mean, random bagels I just avoid everywhere. Definitely in California, I would avoid them. Although again, like these, fresh fruit, can't go wrong with that. Berries parfait, hard to mess that up. This is, I guess, the breakfast menu we're looking at here. Although something occurs to me looking at all of this. So part of Apple having, reportedly good food for its employees is, unlike Google and Facebook and stuff like that, it's not free. The employees pay for the food. Now, maybe they're paying a subsidized price, but they do pay money, is my understanding, for their food. But looking at this big list here, I don't see any prices. So if you won the lottery and got to go to this, come to Apple Park and watch WWDC videos with us, do you get this food for free, or are they going to make you pay?
I would hope they did it for free, but Apple is cheap, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have to pay.
As I said, like the employees have to pay, and they're Apple employees, but you're just guessing this is a one-time special thing, so maybe it's all free. This is what we need reporting on. We need people on the ground. We need photos. We need to say, did you pay? And get a group together, and everyone get one of the entrees and tell us which one was the best.
All right. Next week, everyone else is gonna be talking about the new AR framework or whatever, and we're gonna be talking about whether you had to pay for your San Daniele prosciutto bagel.
Well, once you're on Thursday of WWDC week, people start thinking about the food a little bit more. And not that people are going to be there till Thursday, but I'm saying eventually you get tired of sessions and it's time to talk about the food. So,
yeah. So anyway, we should, for completeness sake, we should read this. So it's the aforementioned prosciutto bagel, smoked salmon and caviar bagel, almond butter and avocado toast, very on brand for California, fresh fruit, berries parfait, overnight oats, and assorted mini breakfast pastries, as well as a beverage selection of Cafe Max juices, coffee, tea, and water.
Gotta go with the assorted breakfast pastries. That's one of my favorite parts of WWDC back when we would go to it in person, is assorted breakfast pastries.
Indeed.
Really hard to screw up, like extremely over buttered, sugar glazed pastries with fruit inside them.
Well, this is what people tune in for. This is the important work. So I'm glad, John, that you spied that.
Isn't it weird to you that the only breakfast bagel options contain either meat or fish on top?
No, it's a lox. It's a lox bagel, or something that vaguely resembles a lox bagel.
Prosciutto is not lox. And
no.
It's a very confused
California-ified.
bagel. I mean, that bagel's not going to be a bagel anyway. It's going to be really hard, dense, not very good bread.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. I'm talking more about the smoked salmon one.
I do wonder is micro horseradish made from tiny horses? I don't know. I have so many questions.
No, the smoked salmon bagel with caviar, because of course, that to me is some fancy person's, I'm too cool for you, artisanal take on a lox bagel, with cream cheese or whatever. But
totally.
What are you going to do?
We are sponsored this week by Hullo Pillow. Have you ever tried a buckwheat pillow? This is something totally different than what you're used to. This is not any kind of fluffy, soft pillow or squishy foam pillow. So a buckwheat pillow is basically a sack full of these like buckwheat hulls inside of it. And it kind of acts like a big bean bag. And what this is great for is you can support your head and neck however you want to. You just kind of mold it into your position or use your head to kind of squish it the way you want it, and then it stays there. And it doesn't collapse under the weight of your head. It supports you really, really well. So this is actually really, really great if you have maybe some neck or shoulder problems. And I actually bought Hullo pillows myself. It was amazing. I instantly converted all of my pillows to Hullo pillows because I had some shoulder issues and some neck issues I was working on. And this just made it so much better to sleep with my neck in a comfortable position. And it was night and day difference. Great thing about this pillow is, you can mold it however you want. You can move the fill around. You can add and remove fill over time if you want more or less, fill in there. It's just an amazing pillow, and it just feels great. It's great for summer too because it's very cool. The air flows through it nicely. It doesn't get all hot and sticky and sweaty. So it's just great. Hullo is also made in the USA with high quality construction, high quality materials, certified organic cotton case. The buckwheat in it is grown and milled right here in the US. So see for yourself. You can sleep on one for 60 nights. If it's not for you, just send it back and you give you a full refund. Go to hullopillow.com/ATP. If you get more than one, you can get a discount of up to $20 per pillow, depending on the size. You can get fast, free shipping on all those orders as well. So once again, hullopillow.com/ATP. Give the gift of better sleep to yourself or a loved one. hullopillow.com/ATP. Thanks to Hullo for supporting my neck and sponsoring our show.
All right, John, let's talk about what everyone has been dying to talk about. Let's talk about your Mac Studio.
So I mentioned last show that I had my Mac Studio, but I hadn't even opened the box, and that I should do that. And when I did, I had to give a report on the fan noise and everything. And so I figured if I'm going to open it up and hook it up to something, I should probably, do the migration as well, because that's a time-consuming process. So that's what I did. I opened it up, I connected to my 4K monitor, and then I had to hook it up to my wife's iMac to start doing the migration. And I realized when I was hooking it up that I had, done all this preparation, got all this stuff together, like doing the AV preparation, doing my Mac Studio preparation. I didn't think about getting a cable to connect the Mac Studio to a 2015 5K iMac. That 5K iMac has on the back of it a bunch of USB-A ports, an Ethernet port, and a bunch of Thunderbolt 2 ports, which look like mini display port, like that's the shape of the connector. And I swore that I had, a Thunderbolt 2 to 3 adapter, like one of the white Apple dongles, and a Thunderbolt 2 cable. And I was close. I had the adapter. In fact, I have 2 of those adapters. So I was excited about that. But I don't have a Thunderbolt 2 cable. I'm like, well, I thought I had a Thunderbolt 2 cable laying around, but I know I did a big cable cleanup recently, so who knows where that is. But I was like, well, worst case scenario, I know where I can get one. I have a Thunderbolt display upstairs. And I looked all over the house, couldn't find one. I'm like, all right, time to go get the Thunderbolt display. So I go up there, move all the boxes, get out the giant Thunderbolt display box, open it up, and the cable is stuck to the back of that monitor.
Oh, no.
It's the rat tail that comes off of it, and the other end is not removable. It's just inside the monitor. So that was sad. So I'm like, all right, well, I did some math. It's a little bit of math. I'm like, okay, Ethernet, 1 gigabit, right? How much data is on the SSD? How long will it take? I came up with like an estimate of like 4 hours. I'm like, that's not that bad. And this is another time to sing the praises of Migration Assistant. I don't remember when the last time I used it was, but use it again here. I plug the machines in, Ethernet, follow the instructions, and then it brings up the Migration Assistant thing and it gives me an option of what I want. And then while it's running, it has like this little, blue link thing that you can press. It says like connection info or connection details, and it shows you all the connections that are available to it that it speed tested. And I just plugged an Ethernet cable, so it said Ethernet speed tested to 900 megabits or whatever. It was like almost a gigabit, right? And then it said peer-to-peer speed tested to 50 megabits. And then it said Wi-Fi speed tested to 40 megabits. I think peer-to-peer is like when it does the sort of airdrop peer-to-peer wireless network without going through like the Euros, essentially, right? And these are two machines that are like 2 feet away. But it was great that it showed me all the options and showed me that I was using the fastest one. And then it even had a tip that said, hint, to make this go faster, connect through Thunderbolt. I'm like, yeah, I know. Thanks. So
That's cool. I didn't know it had that whole thing.
it's really cool. It's really nice. And then it says just connect the Thunderbolt to make it go faster. And I was like, that probably means that if I did have a Thunderbolt 2 cable, I could just plug it in like while it's running and it would just swap to it and go faster. So it started running and it's like, it took a long time to even give an estimate because it's counting files. It's like millions of files or whatever. And eventually gives an estimate like, 20, 30 minutes into it and says it's going to be like 4 or 5 hours. I'm like, oh, well, I'll just let it run. But then I realized, well, I can just go get a Thunderbolt 2 cable. And I was like, well, do I know where I can find one? Do I want to drive to the Apple store? And then I remembered the Marco solution, or maybe also the Casey solution, which is do that courier thing where you pay $10 and someone drives it to your house like in an hour.
Yep.
So I did that. Apple had a 6-foot-long Thunderbolt 2 cable, which I was worried they wouldn't even have, but they did. I just ordered it on my phone and paid the extra $9 for them to courier it to my house. And someone came to my house with a Thunderbolt cable in a little tiny baggie. And then I plugged it into the computer, the back of one computer with the little 2 to 3 adapter, and then into the back of the iMac. And it noticed the connection was there. It speed tested it to like 800 megabytes per second, which is faster than 1 gigabit for people doing the math. And then it switched to it, and it started to go way, way faster. So that's pretty cool. I'm really impressed with what they've done with Migration Assistant. Of course, it successfully did the job, but every step of the way, it told me all the different ways that I could let it do what it was doing. And even in mid-flight, I could buy something and plug it in and let it finish the sort of second half of the migration much faster. And the migration worked, right? So I booted up and started setting up all the things, deleting all the Intel-only apps, making sure I had M1 versions of everything, transferring licenses to software from the iMac to that one, doing all the stuff, transferring my Backblaze license over to that thing, inheriting backup state, got everything all ready to go. And part of the reason why I was deciding to do this migration and set up this thing, aside from just checking that the Mac Studio was what I expected and that it worked, was that I got a surprise email from Apple that said, hey, guess what? Your Studio Display, remember we said June 22nd? Well, actually, it's coming June 1st.
Oh, that's today.
That was very exciting. Yeah, so it did come today, and I did set it up.
Oh, wow.
And so now I've got the whole system all configured. So I had the Mac Studio on the desk next to the 4K, and that was also for me to hear the fan noise. And the fan noise was amply represented on YouTube. It sounds in person like it does in those YouTube videos. It is a thing that you can hear. Mine did not have any of the sort of high-pitched, terrible noises. It was just more of the, that you hear in the videos, and it was very quiet. My wife did not care about it at all. She's like, I don't care about noises as much as you do. I don't care.
Does anybody?
Yeah. I did mess with the fan speed things. I have several fan control apps, some of which I already own from messing with fans on my Mac Pro, and some of which I bought or tried trials of just to mess with this. And, just my Mac Studio, just like everyone else's, is idling at like 1,300 RPM. The minimum speed is 1,100. So the first thing I did was said, how quiet are the fans at 1,100? Because you can just manually turn them to 1,100, or also in one of my apps, you can just set a bunch of rules that says if if this temperature sensor is, or the average of these temperature sensors is below this value, put the fans at this speed, and, basically make your own fan curve, right? And so I did that, and I made a curve such that they drop down to 1,100, when the thing is idle. This could be manufacturing variability. Again, we mentioned that multiple Mac Studios can have different power supplies made by different companies, but on my Mac Studio, if this was the only Mac Studio I had ever seen, my theory would be they make the fans idle at 1,300 because at 1,100, whatever way the electrical power is fed to the fans at 1,100, it adds an extra little seasoning of high-pitched whine to the fans. So yes, the fans get quieter, that you can hear them spin down, they get quieter, but there's this high-pitched whine that comes in. It's almost like the electrical system does not want to feed electricity, so the whatever it needs, the amperage, the volts, whatever, to make them go at 1,100 RPM, that introduces a high-pitched whine. When they go up to 13, no more whine. Is the whine from the fans moving that slowly? Is the whine from the electronics in the fan? Is the whine from the power supply? I don't know. But my particular Mac Studio at 1,100 sounds worse than at 1,300 because that high-pitched whine comes in.
That's so weird. It's just the more we hear about the fan system on the Mac Studio, the more of like a weird miss it seems to be, because it when you look at the other M1 Max and M1 Pro products, like all the the laptops and everything, it just seems like they didn't need that level of noise for that enclosure and that chip. And I don't know what happened there, but it really seems like an odd miss for them.
Yeah, and again, just like the people on YouTube, I don't think I ever saw a temperature over 35 Celsius, which I have no idea what that is in real temperature, but all I know is that it's low. It's low for the insides of a computer. That's the highest temperature sensor was 35 Celsius. And not that I was doing anything particularly big with it, although I was running, downloading all my photos from iCloud and running a Backblaze backup, but it's still the fans never, just like everyone else on YouTube, they idle at 1300 RPM and they just stay around 1300 RPM just forever, right? It does not get hot. So it's not as if this machine is so hot they painted themselves into a thermal. The machine does not get hot doing normal things at all. And yet the fans, there they are at 1300 RPM doing their thing. And like I said, 1100 on my particular Mac Studio is worse. Some people I've heard videos on YouTube of listen to the high pitch whine. But it wasn't when they artificially dropped the fan speed down. It was just at other speeds it was doing that whine. So anyway, I decided having it on a desk for a day doing the migration and then a day setting other stuff. I'm I think I'm going to start this thing underneath. I've got this 3D printed, purchased on Etsy cage for the Mac Studio that I talked about. I did put a link to it in last week's show notes. So if you were looking for it, just look for last week's show notes. There's a link to this Etsy thing. It exactly fits the Mac Studio. It's meant to mount a Mac Studio to the underside of a desk. So I figured, I'm not even going to bother putting this on desk. I know it will bother me a little bit. Let me just put it under. And also it'll free up desk space for my wife's desk because, the iMac didn't have another box that took up space, right? It just had this, the screen. So preserving that sort of appearance for her. So I did put two problems with this 3D printed thing. One, I've got a really big honking keyboard tray on this desk, and the space behind the keyboard tray where I would mount the Mac Studio, there's not enough space to do what the little sling wants you to do. They want you to slide the Mac Studio into it. Screw the thing to the underside of the desk. It's like a little, little shelf, and then slide the Mac Studio in. I can't do that because the desk, the back of the desk has a piece of wood across it, right? It's got a hole for cables to go through, but it's got a piece of wood. So there's not enough room for me to get the Mac Studio behind the thing and slide it in, So I have to put the Mac Studio in the sling and then screw it to the top with the Mac Studio in there. And the only way to get it off would be to unscrew it because I can't slide it out again, right? So I used my experience watching car rebuilding channels and did, I don't know what they would call it, but lots of lifts have another little mini thing inside them that you can use to press up against the transmission. If you unbolt the transmission, but you don't want the transmission to fall down, you have to use a hydraulic jack or lift to press up against it. So I used a camera tripod with no camera on it. And I put it to the right height and then crank the neck up and press the Mac Studio up against the underside of the desk in its little thing. After drilling pilot holes, and then screw the thing in, right? So the first problem was I had to do that whole weird procedure to jack the thing up and screw it in. Second problem is after I screwed it in, I'm looking at it and I'm going, I know nothing about 3D printing. I think this is the second 3D printed object I've ever touched in my life. The first being a really cool dog cow that somebody made. But I don't know how sturdy the plastic resin crap stuff is for 3D printing. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, this thing is held on by 6 screws. The screws are not going anywhere. They're well screwed into the desk. They're very secure, right? But the plastic ears that they're screwed into, I could totally see those just snapping off from fatigue, right? I don't know how durable that is or whatever. So now I feel like I have to add sort of safety wires. Yeah, I'm going to get the security wire that's holding my outdoor camera on. I need to get a length of 2 lengths of metal wire to also kind of screw up to the desk. Say if the plastic cracks, at least the thing won't fall to the ground and land on my dog who loves to lay down there, right? It'll be caught by the security wire. So I do need to sort of reinforce that. But otherwise, it's bolted under the desk. It's out of sight. You can still get to the SD card slot because it's sort of you reach into the keyboard tray. And you can get to the front USB-C Thunderbolt ports, and the back ones you'd have to crawl underneath, but I don't have anything to plug into them yet. And it's a good thing I bolted it where I did because I put it basically right dead center in the desk behind the keyboard tray because the monitor cable that comes with the Apple Studio display is very short. If I had put it to the side, if I had put the Mac Studio in the corner of it, I would have screwed it in. I would have been very sad because I wouldn't be able to connect the display because the wire is, how long is it, like 3 feet or something, Casey? You mean
something like that? Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't describe it as very short, but I would by no means describe it as long. Certainly not long.
Well, I mean, if you got it and you were saying, I'm going to hook this up to my Mac Pro. No, you're not, because your Mac Pro there's no way your Mac Pro is that close to your monitor. It's probably on the floor or to the side. It's really short. It fits fine with the thing underneath where it is, because the hole that's in the back of my desk is like right in the center as well. So I go from the monitor, behind the desk, through the hole, straight into the thing. Same thing with the power cord. It's nice also, by the way, that the power cord is dead center on the Mac Studio, because that works out for me. Sorry, the cabling all worked out perfectly, but I did not expect the cable to be that short on the Mac Studio. And so yeah, under the desk, I can still hear it. I know it's there, but it's so quiet that you wouldn't notice. I feel like even with under the desk, it is still noisier than a 2015 5K iMac at idle. Because 2015 5K iMac at idle, I can't hear anything. 2015 5K iMac doing anything or loading Facebook in a tab, yeah, sounds like something, aircraft carrier or whatever, airplane taking off. But no, it's pretty good where it is. As long as it stays up there, I think I'll be happy with it. Apple Studio display, my wife's reaction when she saw it is like, why is that so small? Because she's used to the iMac with the giant bezels in the chin, right? I'm like, I swear to you, it is exactly the same size. I can get out a tape measure. It's 27 inches, but it looks much smaller. Stand is nice. It doesn't feel quite as gritty as the XDR stand, but and the fact that it doesn't rotate.
Did you get the fancy stand, or did you get?
Yeah, I got the fancy height adjustable one. I was trying to pick which height to put it at, but that works well. Let's see, the camera worse than I thought. Like, I saw all the videos, we talked about it on the show. I was not prepared to how bad it would look. Like, I mean, part of it is what we see, you see photographs of it on Twitter that are recompressed, and you see YouTube videos that are themselves compressed, but seeing it in real life, boy, it just makes a complete mess out of my face. I look like I'm in an impressionist painting. Like, it's just so posterized, right? So just really bad. It almost makes me think that, like, looking up at my fancy 4K Logitech magnetic snap-on thing, that there's a third-party opportunity for something similar to this product, something that magnetically attaches to the top of the studio display that has a tiny little USB-C cord that's just long enough to reach down into one of the studio display's USB-C ports. I would probably buy that product, because, boy, this camera is stinky. I mean, I was warned, but anyway, we'll just ignore it. Speakers sound good. Monitor itself looks good. Although I do notice it's kind of weird that, like, Casey, you're looking at the monitor right now, so tell me if you notice this. From my normal sitting position, if I look at the bottom edge of the monitor, past where the pixels end, there's like a little, the little part of black. Do you see a little bit of the silver case, like, kind of smiling at you on the edges?
No, but I do have the light on. It's throwback. I am in my sleepy shirt, but the light is on. And even with my phone's flash, I don't know, but my eyes are garbage. And I can't say I've ever noticed that now. Not to say you're wrong. I have never noticed.
Yeah, it's almost like you can see a hint of the silver surround. Like there's a tiny, tiny silver rim around the whole display. Rather than looking at the XDR, the black sort of covers everything, and you can't see any of the silver from normal viewing angles. But the studio display, you can see a little sliver of the silver kind of around the whole display, but I mostly notice it on the bottom because of the angle that the thing is held. I don't know. I'll look at it more. It's not distracting or anything. It's just something I noticed that is different than the XDR. Let's see what else about the studio Mac Studio setup. I'm annoyed by photos because I didn't bother copying my photo library. I'm like, I call photos, so I'll just re-download it all. So I hook up the library, make it the system library. I can put it on the main SSD now because it's nice and big. I set it to download photos, and it says downloading 145,000 photos, right? And that's what it says for the next day or two. Downloading. The number never changes. There's no indication of progress. No indication that it is making any progress. There I am in activity monitor looking at the network packets going by saying, is it doing anything? Is it downloading anything? Is something happening? Is this ever going to finish? So I don't know. I'll let you know in a week or two. I mean, it's like, it's like a terabyte of photos, so it's not going to happen overnight. But I wish I knew if it was working at all. And if it was, I wish I could make it go faster. More terrible interface from photos. But yeah, other than that, everything seems to work well. As far as my wife's concerned, she, went away and came back, and she has a different looking computer. but all her same stuff is on it, and it's a million times faster than it was, but she doesn't care about that for the most part. I guess it's quieter now because she can open more tabs on sites that have terrible ads that used to cause her 5K IMAX fans to spin up until the thing looked like it was going to take off from the desk, and now it will just quietly sit there grinding the CPU with those terrible ads. But other than that, I give it a... I mean, my hopes are that this is going to be her computer for the next, 7 or 8 years, 10 years. 2015 iMac lasted her into 2022, so that's a pretty good run. I hope this will last just as long, because I don't see why it shouldn't. She's happy with this setup. She likes a keyboard and a mouse. She likes a 27-inch 5K monitor with speakers built in and a camera. She doesn't care that much about the camera being crappy, but it is. As long as that little thing stuck to the underside of the desk doesn't get any noisier over time and stays stuck to the underside of the desk, I think it'll be fine. I've got plenty of room to grow. I haven't even filled any of the Thunderbolt ports. She's got a big USB hub on the desk, and she's got the USB-C Thunderbolt ports all waiting to receive fancier backup disks and all sorts of other stuff. So thumbs up so far.
I am glad that both of you are happy. All right, and I can't believe that you're not complaining about the fan being in the same room that you occupy.
Well, Marco can tell me if he hears it on the microphone. I mean, I can't, with my headphones on, I can hear my Mac Pro, which is, a few feet away from me, but I can't hear with my headphones on the thing way back there. When I sit in front of her computer, I can hear it, but just barely.
No, I mean, and I wouldn't expect it to be a problem for podcasting. It would have to be a pretty loud fan for that I think you would have other problems with. But no, I'm surprised. Like, again, it seems odd to me that both the Mac Studio and the Studio Display both have weird, seemingly unnecessary flaws. The Studio Display has its really terrible camera that somehow happened, and the Mac Studio has this really odd fan noise situation that seems unnecessary. I'm surprised at both of these products that we were very excited about them when they were announced, because like spec wise they seem great and they fill important roles in the lineup. And when you look at Apple's other recent launches, they've been basically flawless. The MacBook Pros, basically flawless. Before that, the M1 series, the M1 iMac, the M1 MacBook Air, and MacBook, the 13-inch weird MacBook Pro that shouldn't quite be a Pro, the little Mac Mini with the M1, all of those products basically perfect. Like so, it's odd to have these two, sort of flagship products have these really weird downsides that seem totally avoidable. But I don't know. I don't know what happened there. But hopefully. We'll see with the Mac Pro when that ever comes. We'll kind of see how the story rounds itself out. I also think we are still kind of missing the M1 Pro based Mac Mini, which seems like it should exist and yet doesn't. And maybe that would answer some of the questions and close some of these gaps. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see how the story closes out. But this seems like an odd place for it to be in right now.
Yeah, like if the Mac Studio was as quiet as the M1 Mac Mini, and obviously there's just more stuff in there. If you compare the size of the M1s and the M1 Mac Mini, it's so much smaller than the Pro or the Ultra that's in this thing. So I get it, but like if it was that quiet, I would have a lot more fondness for its very small form factor. And as it stands now, it's great that it's small, so I can shove it underneath my desk. But if it was 50% bigger, but also silent, I would just put it on the desk, right? So it's kind of like the only reason I'm glad that this is small and I can smuggle it on a desk is because I want to get that fan as far away from me as possible. But yeah, it's not clear to me what, like, that they needed this much sort of heat removal stuff and that they had to wedge it in there with two small diameter high speed fans rather than one much more lazy large diameter fan. And if they had just done it like a chimney with cold air in the bottom, hot air on the top with a large diameter fan instead, like they could have made a lot of different choices, but it seemed like some stuff was sacrificed on the altar of making it look like a big Mac Mini, which is air in the bottom, hot, cool air in the bottom, hot air at the back.
Yeah, but like what? Like you can get that exact same chip, not the Ultra, I know, but like you can get the Max, that exact same chip in the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and it's silent. Like I just, it's so that's why it's so odd to me. But the reality is, I'm not, very selfishly, I'm not upset too much about this because I don't want that computer now.
I mean, maybe it is the power supplies that we were talking about before. Like, there's DC voltage coming from the batteries inside a MacBook Pro, right? So there's no power supply circuitry to turn AC into DC and all this stuff. Maybe is that the big difference? Is it just the giant analog circuit board and the associated analog noise and additional heat. Like,
well, but my MacBook Pro is powered by a very small, fanless, silent little white power brick too. So like that doesn't seem to be the only difference either.
But it's external. Like that can radiate heat out into the room, and the power bricks may not be sound. When I was hooking stuff up, like I was hooking up the USB hub just to I have old like USB 3 hub to just put lightning cables and crap on, so it's on the desk, right? And I was going to hook that up, and I took my wife's one off. I'm like, this one looks kind of cruddy and dusty. Let me go get a newer one that I had in the attic. So I go up to the attic and bring down the newer one. And I'm like, well, I don't need to, I should use all new stuff. So I took out the old one entirely. Took out the cable, the USB hub, and of course the external brick thing that they all come with, right? And I get the brand new stuff, and I hook it all up, and I'm crawling on the desk, connecting it together, and I plug in the brick into the UPS because it also runs the USB from the UPS also runs through this, so I don't want it to go out when power goes out because that's how the Mac knows to shut down. Anyway, and when I did that, I started to hear this like buzzing, ticking noise from inside the power brick, which I just recognized as like analog electronic noise, like some coil of wire in there is doing something or whatever. And I unplug it from the UPS. And it's still making the noise because some capacitor in there was slowly discharging or whatever. I gave it to my wife. Hold this to your ear. I'm like, hey, hold the brick. It was making noise. So even like that little external power brick, you're like, oh, I have this white little power brick or whatever. It's possible to screw that up too if you just have a cheap type power brick. That anything can make. I hate analog electronics. I wish everything was digital. I know that's not the world we live in, right? But you need the analog electronics to power the digital things. But things like a power brick, they can have problems too. And if that little ticking annoying thing was inside a computer, it would just, drive you mad because it's like, what is that noise? What is that doing that? Anyway, the short version is I just swapped back for the previous power brick. It was exactly the same for the previous USB hub, but this one didn't make any noise when I plugged it in. So analog electronics, man, it's just nothing but trouble.
Well, so far, desktop, laptop seems to be winning again.
Well, if your white power brick was making noise, you probably wouldn't hear it when it's on the floor. But I was crawling around like with my ear practically touching the thing. I was like, no, it doesn't sound healthy to me. I need to get the one that doesn't make this noise.
Well, and also another benefit to the laptop lifestyle is like things are more modular. Like if that white power brick starts making noise, I can just replace it. You can't quite easily do that with the power supply inside your desktop.
Yeah, that's what Apple cares for. Hopefully, I don't ever have to use it.
We are brought to you this week by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform for making amazing websites. And this can be from everything from your hobby or a personal site for you or a new project online to a business and a brand site. You can stand out with a beautiful website with Squarespace. You can engage with your audience and you can sell anything, your products, your content, even your time. Squarespace makes it super easy to make any kind of website. And you don't have to be a developer. Everything is visual and easy to use. There's no coding anywhere that you have to get into. There's no server management. You don't have to worry about software updates or patches or uptime or security vulnerabilities, anything like that. You don't have all of that's out of your hands with Squarespace. So you get to focus on your product, your business, your hobby, your podcast, whatever it is you're hosting on Squarespace. When you do those, you can have things like wonderful analytics. You can have insights to grow your business, learn where your site's visits and sales are coming from, which channels are most effective. You can have amazing custom templates. You can get started with their best-in-class website templates, and you can customize them to fit your needs. And you can have amazing things like online storefront support, member area support, SEO tools. All of this is built in with Squarespace. If you need any support, they have amazing support available 24/7, and it's such a great product. I've used it myself for lots of sites. My wife hosts an entire storefront there, and it's so easy to set up. See for yourself by starting a free trial at squarespace.com/ATP. When you're ready to launch, use offer code ATP to save 10% off your first purchase of your website or domain. Once again, that's squarespace.com/ATP for that free trial. And when you're ready to sign up, use offer code ATP for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring our show.
Now we have finally gotten to the time that we should talk WWDC, and it is this coming Monday as we record. It is just a few days away as we record on Wednesday night. It is this coming Monday. We should talk about our hopes, our predictions, and I had a lead-off question that I'd like to ask both of you, and let's start with Marco. Why is it in person at all this year? Why is this year different from other years? Is it for the big splash reveal for like a Mac Pro, God help me, or AR glasses, or do they just want to dip their toe in the water? Like, what do you think the reason is for in person?
I think Apple likes in-person events a lot. I think they do the remote events, during COVID because they had to. And I think they want to get back to having in-person events for press and things like and WWDC as soon as they can, reasonably and responsibly. And it's certainly up for debate whether this counts as that time or not. But setting that aside, I think they love the in-person events. In-person events, when you have a big launch like this, or whether it's something super significant like a new platform, like an AR headset, or whether it's just the year's software updates, that's also a big deal to them and to us. And so I don't think it needs to be a major hardware or platform release year for them to want an in-person event and for an in-person event to be really cool and fun. I think it's interesting that we have this kind of hybrid where like the keynote is almost certainly pre-recorded. And so the keynote watching is going to be like, basically a movie watching, projected on a screen and we're just watching a movie. That's kind of interesting. But I do think they want to have in-person events. I also think the more little bits and pieces we pick up and they kind of trickle out, the more it seems like this is also the launch party for the Developer Center. And they clearly want to show that off and to officially open it up and officially announce what it is, what it's supposed to do, long term. And they want to have a big party to open up their new developer center. I think that's what this is. And from the little bits and pieces we've heard, where it seems like it's going to be kind of a permanent home for developer relations and some kind of labs sort of things, and maybe they could bring in developers at certain times for access to certain early hardware, early software, whatever the case may be. It seems like this is going to be a big thing for them going forward, and they want to unveil this all to us at one big party. Here's the new developer center. Enjoy. Here's what it's for. So I think all of that kind of goes into play for this particular year's event. That being said, it wouldn't surprise me if this is also a test balloon of sorts to see if all future WWDCs might be done this way. Because we've talked at length all the time about all the different downsides of trying to wedge this conference into a city with a large convention center and getting everyone into all the hotels, and everything's so expensive for everyone. And even if you fit 5,000 or 6,000 people in the convention center, you still are excluding thousands of other people who want to come, but either can't afford to, or can't get a ticket, or can't get there, whatever the case may be. And so I think it's clear over the last, even before COVID, over the last few years, that WWDC probably should change in a way to make it even more and more inclusive and more accessible to more people. And they certainly did their best with an in-person conference, with having live stream sessions and all the recordings going up super fast and all the transcripts and all that stuff. They really amped a lot of that up over those last few years of being in person, but none of that compared to what they were able to do since COVID, with having it be full-time remote with just hugely more accessible content, because it had to be. Finally making labs accessible remotely, all that stuff that they added. And I think this might be their vision of how it goes forward. Now that we can have in-person events, and now that they have this new developer center that seems to, probably have a capacity in the hundreds rather than in the thousands at most, possibly. I would bet it's in the low hundreds, but maybe this is part of their vision of, like, rather than having that big event, they pretty much produce the whole conference as if it's remote every time, and it's mostly remote, but it has this small in-person component that is partly for press and partly for certain groups of developers they want to have out there, students, maybe scholarship winners, certain featured developers, certain newcomers, things like that. So that's, I think, why they're doing it. And I think this is probably going to be the path forward. It would greatly surprise me if we ever had another WWDC in San Jose or San Francisco.
It reminds me a little bit of press junkets for car reviews, right? So WWDC is run, it's a developer conference. So Apple has a developer relations department or whatever they call it. It's people whose job it is to interface with developers. And there's a lot of overlap between that, like developer relations and marketing. You don't want to call it marketing, but it is a form of marketing because you want people to develop for your platform. You want to convince them to develop for your platform. You want to show them how cool your platform is, how successful they can be on your platform. You want to support them. That's what developer relations is. It is very much, a marketing type of position. And when you're doing any kind of marketing, like a car company that wants you to tell you about here's the new Corvette or whatever, having people in person is really important because that's, just the way people work. You'll bring them to a beautiful place. You'll show them your car. You'll let a famous F1 driver drive them around a track in your car. You'll let them run on a drag strip. Like you'll do all this stuff because you want to give these human being journalists, press, whatever, a positive experience, and for them to associate that positive experience with your car, and then hopefully go back and write something nice about your car. Now, it's not like any decent car journalist is going to say, well, they brought me to a beautiful place in Italy, therefore I'm going to say this car is great, right? But humans being humans, there is some small amount of the positive experience you had that will influence, even if unconsciously, what you write about it. And so it is smart if you're doing something related to marketing to get people in person. It is easier to impress upon them that your product is good. You can explain to them in person, you can answer their questions there, and you can give them a positive experience. Way easier to do that in person than remote, right? So I think anyone involved in any marketing position for any product in any company always wants to get, particularly the press, but even also just in this case, developers, like actual people, get them to where you can control their experience. Get them to come to your beautiful campus so that you can plan a day for them. Look at the menu we just read. Look at all the fun activities they're going to have. You're going to tour the fitness center. Everyone's going to be nice and it's just going to be sunny and beautiful. It's California, right? That is super important. That is never going to go away. And so I feel like, you would say, like, oh, they'll just have it in person for press, right? But for developer relations, they want, granted, a tiny subset, but they want developers to also have that experience. They want someone to say, oh, I won the lottery for WWDC to come in person, and I had such a great time, and I met some fun people, and I did cool things, and I learned a lot, and I got to eat good food. That will make them feel good about developing for the Apple platforms, or make them feel better than they did before. Make them feel better than the people who just had to watch it sitting at home, right? So, and that, and you ramp that all the way up. It's like, well, that's why WWDC kept getting bigger. They made it as big as they possibly could without turning it into like Oracle World or whatever, right? They didn't make it 20,000 people, but they didn't keep it at like 100 or 200. They could have. They went all the way up to like, 5,500 or whatever is kind of where WWDC maxed out, and they didn't want to make it any bigger than that. They could have made it bigger. They could afford to make it bigger. They could have gone to bigger venues, but they wanted to get as many developers as there as possible without totally destroying the conference, because every developer that is there that still has a good time, if they can provide a good experience to those developers, it's a developer relations. They want developers to feel good about the Apple platform. So I don't think it's just going to be press in person. Yes, of course, they want the press to be in person and they have a whole separate experience for them. They also want some developers to be in person, and they want it to feel special for them. And I feel like obviously a smaller in-person presence, whether it's COVID related or whether, like Marco said, like they'll just keep it small, you're going to feel even more special if you're one of like 300 versus being one of 5,500 or whatever. So I think there will always be an in-person component when they're able to do it. I don't know if they're going to ramp back up to 5,000. It really depends on who's making the calls there. I know there are probably people who ran WWDC for years who, if they had their choice, would want to go back to 5,000 people if they could, COVID allowing some point in the future, right? But there might be some people who say, let's keep it around to 300 and we'll just cycle through those 300s. I think it's tougher now because there are so many more developers than there used to be. Right, WWDC more or less maxed out, but the number of developers on Apple platforms just kept increasing and increasing with the iOS and the iPhone and everything. It's huge now. It's almost like the difference between 5,000 and 300 is nothing. It's percentage wise, it's like the third decimal point or something. And it really just, to first approximation, nobody gets to go to WWDC. If you consider they have how many millions of developers or how many millions of developer account. So it could be they keep it small and they say, percentage-wise, we're pretty much the same percentage. You didn't have a chance before and you don't have a chance now, but the people who do come, they're going to have a good experience. We're going to make sure we have a good experience. Maybe they'll always continue to have it at Apple Park because that's an environment that they totally control and they don't have to rent out and they don't have to pay for box lunches. So there's that.
I don't know. I asked the question because I don't think, and now we're getting into predictions and whatnot, I don't think we're seeing any real like AR glass sort of announcement or release or anything like that. I don't even think in all likelihood that we're going to get anything that's a strong indicator or like teaser or anything like that. But nevertheless, if they were to do some new thing like AR glasses, I can absolutely see them saying, come hell or high water, we're going to have people in person to do it because we want to hear the cheers. We want to hear people go nuts. And so I don't think it's going to happen, but it is an easy thing for me to imagine that is why they want to do something in person. But I don't know if that's realistic. I don't think it is. So what do we want?
Well, wait, before you move on to the AR thing, right? So if you think about hardware things that they've introduced at WWDC, they tend not to want to let the people who are attending WWDC really get near them. Think of the iMac Pro, think of the Mac Pro. They were there and they were announced and you could see them, but you weren't even allowed to touch the iMac Pro. And the Mac Pro, they had people demoing them for you, but they didn't really want you to use them. It's, so the idea that they're going to, if they were going to introduce AR glasses, it's like we want to have people there. So if you're picturing people there, like, oh, I'm going to wait in the line and I'm going to strap this thing on my head and I'm going to try it out, that doesn't seem like a very Apple thing to do. But on the other hand, if they don't do that, it's not like you can have someone wearing the headset and, waving things around and then you get to look on a screen to see what they see. That doesn't give you the experience either. You have to actually put it on your head. But I don't think Apple would want you to put it on your head. And if they did want you to put it on your head, they'd be much more likely to do that with a group of a couple hundred people. And that brings up another question about this, by the way. Does anyone know how many people have been invited to go to, not press, but how many like regular people have been invited to go to Apple Park?
Not at all. No, I don't think that information has come out at all.
I mean, maybe it's 5,500 people. I don't know. Like we're talking about this as if it's going to be a few hundred. How many people can fit in Cafe Max? How many people are in the Ring building? It's really a mystery. Like, if you could ask all your friends and maybe do an estimate and say, random sampling, how many people tried to apply and how many people got in, but it's difficult because it's not actually random if you're just asking your friends. It depends on what circuit you're driving. Like Paul Hudson, for example, I think didn't get in until someone at Apple got a clue and said, you should invite Paul Hudson. What are you doing? And he got invited. So yeah, it's still a lot of questions about this, but I think the in-person thing is entirely to do with that you must have people in person if you want to do effective marketing to either developers or press, and it has nothing to do with what is or isn't going to be announced.
Fair enough. All right. So what do we want? What do we want? What do we expect? How do you want to skin this cat?
Well, every WWDC in recent memory, there's a new version of iOS, a new version of macOS, and also a new version of iPadOS, and maybe a new OS. Like I didn't even put tvOS on this list. I guess it's tvOS and then RealityOS. Did I miss an OS? We got tvOS, RealityOS. Is there another one? AudioOS, WatchOS. There's another one. WatchOS. But anyway, yeah. There are new versions of the major operating systems, and every once in a while there's a new operating system like RealityOS if they do the AR thing or whatever. I hope they don't call it ROS. I think the code names and all the code is that it's RealityOS. But anyway, what do we want from let's start with the big one. What do we want from a new iOS, from a new Mac OS? Like, do we have anything that we really want out of any of these OSs, or is it just more like, well, whatever they give us will be nice, don't screw it up, and fix all the bugs?
I think for iOS, something I have been fiddling with a little bit more recently is shortcuts, both on iOS and iPadOS. And I like to create shortcuts to control kind of system level things or things in the house. So a couple of examples of this is I've been dabbling with Tailscale recently, which is very, very interesting. And maybe we can talk about that another time, but I've been dabbling with it and I wanted to control Tailscale a little bit more and control VPN settings on the phone a little bit more because Tailscale is sort of, but not really a VPN. And there's no real good hook in shortcuts to control VPN settings. And additionally, I wanted to, I've been doing a lot of Apple Fitness Plus workouts recently. It's been talked about a lot recently. And I have a shortcut that when I stop exercising, then it will automatically turn the ceiling fan in the living room off if it's not hot outside, which is pretty slick. But I also wanted to be able to say, okay, well, when I start a workout and you see that the Apple TV is on and playing Apple Fitness, then go ahead and turn the fan on. But there's no way to do that. Like, there's no way to query what the state of the Apple TV is, or not any good way of doing it anyhow. And so I feel like more robust hooks for shortcuts would be really, really cool. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because I mean, I've used shortcuts since it came out, since it was workflow even, but I'm not a particularly robust user of it, but I've been getting into it a lot more recently. And I found it really is quite powerful if you want it to be. But I wish it could get its tentacles into more places. And similar idea, widgets. I like widgets. I use them on both iPad and on my phone as well. But I do wish that they were even just marginally interactive. And I on certain size widgets, you can have like a couple of touch targets or something like that. But I wish they could be updated more frequently, and not by magic, but by the widget being asked if it wants to update, or perhaps being told to update. And I haven't looked at how the widget system works in a while. Maybe Marco, you have more insight onto this, but I wish they were a little more interactive and a little more robust. And I think that both of those would be really cool. I'm sure there's other things I'm not thinking of. I mean, bug fixes, reliability, etc. But recently, this is a complete recency bias, but recently those are a couple things that have ground my gears. I don't know, Marco, what are you looking for in iOS?
What I want most from iOS is just more maturation of the frameworks and the tools. And the good thing is that's almost always what happens. So I think I'm very likely to get that. Like widgets, the widget system is actually pretty good. Some of the rumors are that we might be able to get them onto the lock screen on the phone, and that would be great. I've wanted some kind of additional customization of the iPhone lock screen for a while now. Any kind of widget advancements to make them potentially slightly interactive would be very nice. That being said, based on the way they work, I actually don't expect that to happen.
Same, yeah.
Because they seem like they just want to be like these serialized, pre-rendered Swift UI views, and to have any kind of like when your widget's showing on screen, none of your code is running. Like the OS is basically showing the timeline of views that you have given it, but the reason why widgets don't have active buttons and things in them is that your code is not running when those are on screen necessarily. And I think that side of how they're implemented is likely to stay that way for the foreseeable future. So that I'm not expecting interactive widgets really, but maybe certain ways to make them a little bit more lively. Certain advances in things like the timeline views, maybe some ability to use some basic animations, like in a controllable way. That kind of stuff could be nice. But for the most part in iOS, what I want is make Xcode better, make Swift UI better. Right now, using Swift UI on iOS is still a very frustrating roller coaster. When you're on the happy path and you're doing things the way they do it on the conference slides, it works great. And the second it touches the real world, you just slam into walls everywhere. And it's very difficult to use Swift UI in the real world without hitting major problems that require huge amounts of deep dives and hacks and workarounds and Googling and everything else that is a very frustrating time waste and often requires you to rip out parts of Swift UI and rewrite stuff in UIKit. This framework is now a couple years old. It's still very, very young. Please make Swift UI significantly better, and I think and I hope they will. So that's pretty much it for me for iOS.
Yeah, I'd like to build, though, on what you said about Swift UI, because I have had a pretty decent experience, all told, with Swift UI. Almost the entirety of Masquerade is Swift UI, and it has caused me to relearn a lot of things and to think of things differently. But by and large, it is pretty good. But Swift UI smells so deeply to me like it is being dog-fooded some more than WatchKit was. Sorry, trigger warning, Marco. But it doesn't seem like it's being properly dog-fooded, but I don't know.
Dog-fed?
Dog-fed, right, exactly. I'm not sure where to go from here, but you know what I'm saying. I feel like a lot more dog-fooding would go a long way. And it really seems like Swift UI is one of those things where, as an academic adventure, it is interesting and fairly robust, but as soon as you try to do real world things with it, it starts to fall down, just like you were saying. It starts to fall down relatively quickly and relatively spectacularly. Again, I say that, and I'm being a little hyperbolic, because Masquerade is SwiftUI and it does work. And I did have to jump through hoops, but it wasn't completely egregious, but it was way more than I should have for a framework that's already a couple of years old. So I could not agree more that I want to see like a deep concentration on SwiftUI, and I want to have them tell us. Like, I think they made it public, like that the weather app rewrite was SwiftUI. What they didn't make public, and what we have heard through the grapevine, is that it was a freaking mess. And like frame rates were garbage, and they had to do a bunch of fixes specifically to make the weather app work better. But one way or another, I think a lot more dog fooding on SwiftUI would be really, really healthy and help us do our jobs better. And so often with Apple, they'll throw something across the fence and say, here, this is good enough, right? Just be thankful for it and buzz off. And in reality, it's just not. And so I really, really, really hope that the State of the Union is basically, here's all the ways that we've made SwiftUI better.
Yeah, because SwiftUI, I mean, there are just so many very large shortcomings and frustrations with it in use right now. Like, yeah, we need significant improvements on the API front. We need a ton of bug fixes. We need tons of new ways we can control behaviors and appearances. We need major advances in the tooling side of it. You know, SwiftUI right now has... it not only does it crush your machine performance-wise, but when things go wrong, you get these really terrible error messages or error behaviors that are inscrutable, and almost none of it's documented, almost none of it's discoverable. The process of so you have a SwiftUI view, which you have all this like dot chaining going on to do pretty much everything. How do you know what dot chain you can apply where? Well, the correct thing is for the tooling to assist you with various autocomplete things and good documentation. And the reality is the tooling breaks constantly and doesn't really help you very much. And the documentation is almost non-existent and very kind of abstract. There's not really like examples anywhere. And so it's everything's very abstract and hard to know like what to look for. So the answer really is you have to Google everything. Like everything. And the Google results you get are not Apple's documentation, because it mostly doesn't exist and isn't helpful. What you're actually getting is like various, Swift by Sundell posts and stuff like that, because everyone is asking these questions and they're so incredibly non-obvious when you're in the coding environment and in Apple's documentation and everything. So you have to go to blog posts and Stack Overflow and everything, because it makes no sense. It's not discoverable at all. Like in the same way that like I feel like all these dot chaining operators in SwiftUI, they have like the discoverability problem of swipe gestures and pinch gestures in touchscreen interfaces. It's like, how do you do this thing? Oh, well, you just type in, dot accessibility modifier or whatever. It's like, okay, but how would I have ever known that if you didn't tell me? Because that's visible nowhere. And it's all for the same goal of like we have these code samples that look so simple. They're so visually simple. And he's just like, Tux UIs that are super minimal and all gestural are so simple looking and clean, right? But then, okay, well, how do I use it? Oh, you got to Google for it. So I really, and I think a lot of that is just inherent to both what's currently in fashion in software development and also the design of SwiftUI in general. And so I don't expect that to change at a deep level, which is unfortunate because it needs to. But at least within the bounds of what they are likely to do, I would hope for at least some slight improvement in those areas. But that being said, even hoping for slight improvement, given reality, I think that's a tall order. So my more realistic expectation is at least give me more dot modifiers and crap that I'll have to Google that will allow me to do the behaviors I need to do in my apps that will avoid me having to dive into UIKit.
Since we're in the Swift UI corner here, I think it's something I've been stewing about. I almost wrote something about it, but I didn't feel like I could nail it down to the point where I could write something. But I had nailed it down to the point where I can blabber about it on a podcast. You mentioned like the dot chaining and everything like that, but it's Swift UI isn't just syntactic sugar for the normal things that you would do in UIKit. Its whole point is that it's declarative instead of imperative. You describe the way things are rather than saying, if this happens, then do that or whatever. And sometimes when you parachute someone who's used to messing with UIKit into that environment, they sort of recreate imperative programming by sprinkling state on top of their SwiftUI views and adding conditionals inside them and basically doing imperative programming in a declarative way. It's like, look, I have if, it's the same thing. And now I just got to do is make sure the right state gets sprinkled onto the right places. And it's just like I'm writing imperative code, but you're not. It's trying to be declarative, and you end up making the structure that gets fed to this larger thing. And that's not just fashion. Like, there is a point to that. They emphasize this in the first round of SwiftUI things, like that the machinery that runs your declarative thing, the fact that you don't have to write the machinery, the fact that you can't write the machinery has advantages in terms of fewer bugs, because it's, you're just essentially creating a structure, and then the machine, assuming the machine is relatively bug-free, runs your structure, and you don't have to worry about maintaining state and everything. It all happens automatically, and then they can compress all your views into one thing for efficiency purposes. And like, there are advantages. It's not just, declaratives and style, let's do that. There are technical advantages to it, which they touted heavily. And those advantages are real, but of course, what you just all discussed is, okay, but there are also disadvantages. And when I look at the disadvantages, what SwiftUI looks like to me is another declarative style technology that I have a lot of experience with, that lots of people would describe exactly the same way Marco just described SwiftUI, which is, I can't figure out how to do what I want. The documentation is not useful for me. There aren't enough examples, and anytime I want to do anything, I have to Google. And the name of that technology is, chat room anyway, 7
CSS?
seconds delay will take too long. CSS, that's right. Cascading style sheets. So here's the question
CSS has way better documentation out there than SwiftUI.
That's a low
CSS
bar.
1 came out in 1996, so it's a little bit older than SwiftUI. But here's the question about SwiftUI, right? So it could be two possible things could be here, right? CSS today now is amazing, but still people need to Google for like how to center stuff vertically or whatever. Anyway, SwiftUI, some people look at it and say, no declarative UI description system is ever going to be sufficient to write a full-featured application, because inevitably in any good application, there's some point where you want to do some weird-ass thing that you have no way to declare, right? To Marco's point, there's not a dot modifier for it. And you need to basically say, from this piece of code, when this thing's happen, I'm going to run some regular old style imperative code to reach over there and do a thing, right? Because I just need to do that. And the designers didn't think of it, but I need to do it. And if your framework is imperative, it's real easy to add 3 more lines of your own code, override a handler, do an extra thing. Like, that fits right in the system. That's how the whole system works. You get to write your own code, and your code looks a lot like the framework code. It's just you overrode it and called super or whatever, right? But in a declarative system, yes, you can write your own declarative things, but it's way weirder, and sometimes you can't get at the machinery you want to get at. So some people would say SwiftUI is never going to go all the way. You're never going to get a top-to-bottom SwiftUI app like they're trying to make. You're always going to need some imperative code or some way to get at the engine or some way to extend the engine, and that's the way SwiftUI needs to evolve. Right? Or that it'll never be good enough for a whole system, because declarative is really good for making views and it has lots of advantages, but it's never going to be the whole app. But the other possibility, and both of these things can be true at the same time, is CSS for the longest time frustrated people to hell, because you could do a lot of stuff, but you would never think of the way you had to do it. Like vertical, horizontal centering of elements, making things equal width, but not much wider than this. And there was a long period of time when there are ways to do that in CSS that was like wizardry that made no freaking sense. But then they had like min width and max width. Wow, that made everything a lot easier, didn't? These hacks are neat, right? But still, lots of stuff was hard, right? And again, 1996, CSS1 spec or whatever year that was, right? It took a long time to get to where we are now. Like, what is the Swift UI equivalent of Flexbox, to give just one example? If you don't know all these CSS terms, maybe this is not landing for you, but if you are a web developer, think of how much harder it was to do the things that Flexbox does before Flexbox. What is the equivalent of Flexbox in SwiftUI? What's the equivalent of box sizing border box in SwiftUI? What's the equivalent of min and max width in SwiftUI, right? Now, granted, it doesn't map one-to-one, because SwiftUI has a lot of the things that CSS didn't have for years and years, but there are absolutely situations in SwiftUI that remind me totally of how hard it was to do crap in CSS before quote-unquote modern CSS, or if you couldn't rely on Flexbox being present. Like, I'm at the point now where I will just, when I'm doing like the ATP store page, like I refuse to do it the old-fashioned way to support some old browsers. So I'm sorry if our store page looks crappy to you, but most modern browsers actually do support Flexbox. So I use it, right? And it makes everything so much easier than it was before. I know how to do it the old way, but it's a headache. And that's where I feel like SwiftUI is. And so the question is, does Swift UI just need its Flexbox moment? Does it just need the new set of operations and operators and a remodeling and rethinking of how a major component works? Because box sizing is a big part of CSS, and they've taken several runs at box sizing to try to get it to match the mental model of the programmer. So it could be that Swift UI just needs a few more iterations on that, of them figuring out how can we make Swift UI better match how people think about doing things. But on the other side is, but maybe no declarative system like Swift UI is ever going to be able to do all the things we need a GUI framework to do, and there will always need to be an imperative framework. And so we should figure out, what are we doing here? Does UIKit continue forever in parallel track with Swift UI? Is Swift UI just a view system for UIKit? I know they bridge together really well. So does AppKit and Swift UI. Like, it's neat that you can bridge them, but it's not a compelling developer story until you explain to people. So do we just continue like this forever, where our apps are a hodgepodge of UIKit and Swift UI, whichever is the least frustrating? And by the way, half of these places that are UIKit started as Swift UI until we hit a wall and had to turn back. That's not a great experience. So, Swift UI, some people look at it and say, oh, it's like 3 or 5 or whatever years old. It should be mature by now. But if you look at CSS, I can't do the math in my head because I'm bad at math, but it was around a long time before it was not maddening. And it's arguably still kind of maddening. But Swift UI does look a lot like CSS to me, for good and for ill. CSS has the advantage of being like not owned by a single vendor. And so it kind of won by default because it's the way we style things on the web. So tough luck. And we all just worked on it until it was less sucky. But Swift UI does not have that advantage. Swift UI is not even the only framework within a single company's thing. There's many other choices. So it kind of has to like win a little bit on the merits. And if it is not a plus for Apple's platform, then like, why are they even doing it? Like, are you just annoying your existing developers, not attracting any new ones? The whole promise of Swift UI is that it's a better way to develop, that it would attract developers to your platform. And right now, I feel like it's not quite doing that job.
Well, I mean, when Swift, it's such a cliche and common thing to say. When Swift UI works, and that's a poor way of phrasing it, I guess. When you're doing things that Swift UI is happy with, it is amazing. And I am a terrible designer, but I can make things that look, I think, pretty decent using Swift UI, whereas doing the same thing in UIKit is difficult for me. I guess I'm a novice level iOS developer. I don't know, but there are things that I find
it's certainly more verbose. There's more moving parts. It's yes, but it's like Marcus said. After you make that thing, and you're like, whenever you're doing this tutorial, like now add an icon and now do this, and then like if you like when you're with a new developer and you say you were showing them UIKit and you're going through tutorials, like now make a table view and now add an icon next to it and now make every third one red and like whatever, you're just doing things, and then at a certain point, the person you're teaching will go, what would be cool? Like, I think this would look better if we lined up the baseline of this text with that text. And in UIKit, you can do it. And in Swift UI, it's like, nope, sorry. Like, you have to rewrite the entire Swift UI engine to do that because they have no idea where each other's baselines are, and it's basically impossible. Give up. Whereas that's not true in UIKit.
It is something you can do. In fact, Paul Hudson has a post about it that I've read.
I'm just making an example.
Like, I know. I take your point.
Even the thing of like making equal size buttons with the widest one being as wide as the longest label. Like, there shouldn't be a tutorial page for that. That should be so easy to do.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think Swift UI has potential, and I see potential in Swift UI, and I really believe, and maybe this is a false hero, but I really believe if Apple had to make their stuff using Swift UI, suddenly they'd facepalm and say, oh, this sucks. Oh, we got to make this, and this all way better in order to make this workable.
I mean, you already mentioned the weather app. Like, they are dogfooding, just not enough. But I feel like that's why Swift UI has gotten better to the degree that it has, the little amount of dogfooding they're doing. But it's a bad idea for them to dogfood everything, all at once, right? Doing the weather app is a good first dogfooding. Let's not tell them to just redo every app in Swift UI. They did, Notification Center or those widget things or whatever.
Yeah.
Those still annoy me. I think the mouse over stuff in Swift UI is still broken. That's why I mouse over my notification things and it'll show the X to close it. But then when I go to click on the little thing, like to complete the reminder, that button will disappear. Does this happen to you as well?
No, I don't think so.
My faith in the mouse over abilities of Swift UI is very low. But yeah, I think they will be doing more dog fooding, but I'm not sure you can just say you just need to dog food everything, because then all they're going to do is make all their apps buggy. See also shortcuts for the Mac, right? Like, do you want them to dog food it before it's ready? They have to balance the dog fooding with SwiftUI's team ability to make their framework better. And that's where I get to the question about SwiftUI is like, is this an inherently limited approach that is never going to be able to solve more than 80% of the problems, in which case you need to have an imperative story alongside it? Or are we just waiting for the Flexbox moment?
Going back to a couple things you said, so like on the Mac, I think part of the problem we saw with shortcuts on the Mac, and I think we've seen echoes of this with lots of software developers who have tried to use SwiftUI for non-trivial Mac apps. It seems like the Mac implementation of SwiftUI is significantly less mature and less usable than it is on iOS and watchOS, and I think that makes sense in the sense that we know this is a framework that was born on watchOS. And that then the other platforms kind of, it kind of moved into them later in its development. And it's no secret that the Mac software stack is a pretty low priority for Apple. That even though the Mac is having a pretty great renaissance right now, Mac OS still gets way less time and effort put into it, and still seems to have way more bugs than iOS does. And so, a cutting edge framework that is used for almost nothing on macOS, that is mostly being developed on other platforms, I think that's just going to be a low priority for Apple for the foreseeable future. And so SwiftUI on macOS is pretty rough. SwiftUI on iOS is decent, and SwiftUI on watchOS, where it was born, is pretty great. And I think part of the reason why is that SwiftUI on watchOS, there's a reason why this kind of framework works really well on watchOS. It's a much smaller problem surface. That you have this smaller device. It's way more constrained. There is no better UI framework to drop down to for us. So it's kind of the only choice. And also, all of the limitations of it are things that you run into way less often on watchOS, because you're not trying to customize every single little detail of the navigation bar or whatever. Like, most of those things don't exist on watchOS, and so it's a very simple problem space, and SwiftUI covers it very, very well. On iOS, it's much more problem surface to cover, and it seems less mature, and there's all these so many other edge cases to consider. And so what I think though is like the reason why we all keep trying to climb up this mountain, and even though we keep getting killed, it's not like the mountain doesn't just gently ask us to leave. Like, it just kills us. But the reason why we keep climbing up this stupid mountain is because when SwiftUI works, it's really nice.
Oh, it's the best.
Like, that's why we keep going through all this pain. I'm not saying that this is the wrong approach. It's not. And I'm not saying that I don't see the value in this. I do. I see it all the time. That's why I keep trying, because I want the value it provides. And when it works, it's amazing, but we really need to dramatically increase the rate at which it works for us, and start tackling some of these big, hairy, hard problems about things like discoverability, documentation, performance, tooling, and just covering way more of the edge cases than we cover now.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. We got sidetracked.
Yeah. Pulling back out to the whole OS question here, I think like a broader OS question that is tangentially related to SwiftUI is something we've discussed extensively on past programs, specifically related to the Mac, is what is the Mac development API story? You got Catalyst, you got SwiftUI, you got AppKit. What's the deal? Like, that needs to be more coherent. And on iOS, it seems like the UI kit and SwiftUI, it's not a dichotomy, but like, what is the deal with that? Is that parallel forever? Is that SwiftUI eventually taking over everything? Like, what is the plan? It's much more dire situation on the Mac, because AppKit is getting like no love, and Catalyst is just UI kit in a different place. So it's got its own SwiftUI problems. There was the 12.4 update that apparently broke everybody's existing shipping SwiftUI apps by making all the labels disappear in their Catalyst apps on the Mac. We saw that happen to I think James Thompson's app had that happen, and Steve Troughton-Smith had it happen to his app as well. That you can't do that. You can't break people's existing apps in a point update. So I feel like the API story on macOS for sure, and maybe a little bit on iOS, this is not the year that they're probably going to make it more coherent, but that's kind of a long-term plan that I want to see them at least moving in that direction and sort of rationalizing that. But for the most part, when I look at this OS list, most of these OSs, with the exception of Reality OS, because who knows what that even is going to be, I would say they're mostly all moving in the right direction. It's just complaints about the speed. Obviously, iPad OS is moving in the right direction so slowly that we're pulling our hair out, right? We want more power. We want more flexibility. We get that, in fits and starts. I think keyboard and cursor control was a big leap forward, but it's just we all want more. But no one's going to say it's moving in the wrong direction. Like if you look at iPad OS over the course of its entire existence as a named thing, it's been getting better in the ways that we want it to get better, just more slowly. And every other OS that you list, including even Mac OS, for the most part is moving in the right direction. Again, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Mac shortcuts on Mac, thumbs up. Shortcuts on Mac, the app, thumbs down, right? So give and take. The new notifications, dog fooding Swift UI, that's a little bit janky, but things are kind of moving in the right direction, getting a little bit better, adding features. And so if I look at most of these OS projects, they just do a year where every OS gets some new set of features. A fancier lock screen on iOS, some new stuff on watchOS. Hey, third-party watch faces, why not this year? Anytime now. iPad OS gets some more features for flexibility, just not as much as people want. Mac OS gets a little bit nicer, fewer bugs. It's like even tvOS for the most part. When they add features to tvOS, there are features that we say, yeah, please use the frame rate matching and better HDR support, and not that they advanced rapidly. I think directionally, all these OSs, none of them are on the wrong path. Some would argue maybe iPad OS is on the wrong, but I think it's on the right path. It's just going so incredibly slowly that it's just annoying us. So I'm happy for all of them to move forward. What I would like, in the direction they're already going, what I would like though is fewer steps back. Can we just get some clean wins? For example, if shortcuts had come to the Mac and the app hadn't been terrible, that would have been better, right? Or if some new feature comes out but doesn't bring with it a bunch of bugs, or existing bugs from 2 OSs ago don't get fixed, crap like that makes it otherwise good year going along the paths they've made for themselves, just makes everyone feel worse about it, right? For many years we've always sort of bargained with the mythical Apple, saying can we just do an update where you just fix bugs? I don't need any features or whatever. But really, this is saying is fewer steps back. You do have to take some steps forward. You should add features. You should add refinements. Feel free to drop apps that aren't important anymore. But please, fewer steps back, fewer stumbles, fix some old broken stuff. I feel like we can get that this year out of all these OSs. And Reality OS is going to be a big distraction, because it'll be brand new and who knows what it'll be, and it's tightly tied to hardware that may or may not be a flop. So that's a big question mark. But the whole rest of the stable of the OSs, just keep doing what you're doing, just do it a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree. So, Marco, are we going to see a headset?
I think it's a crapshoot. I mean, the rumors have all pretty much consolidated on saying, whoops, we were wrong. Actually, it's not coming yet. Which is funny because 2 weeks ago they were saying it's definitely coming. Get ready, So, we'll see. But I don't know. I think at this point, every year that goes by, we always say, it feels like the headset's getting pretty close. Maybe this is the year of the headset. And then after the conference passes and we don't get it, we say, well, yeah, I guess it was too early. So we'll see. I mean, again, I think whatever happens there or doesn't happen there, we don't know how that's going to end yet, as John was just saying. That it could be a flop. It could be a really early thing that takes a while to really warm up. It's somewhat similar to the way the watch did. It could end up like the iPad, which that's a whole thing. I mean, by the way, we got to mention Federico's story before I forget. First of all, Federico's an amazing writer, and this is just a masterpiece. So what we're talking about is Federico Fatici on Mac Stories wrote this big article a few days ago that he has been known as not only an iPad power user, I would say the iPad power user. He is the iPad Pro. If there's a human version of what is the iPad Pro, who is the iPad Pro? It's Federico Fatici. And he has been using an iPad full time for years and years, and was always pushing the envelope on what you could do work wise on an iPad and what it means to be an iPad Pro user. And he published this bombshell the other day of saying basically he kind of secretly switched to the Mac for the last few months, and has been doing all of his work on the Mac, and wrote this big thing comparing what it's been like, and spoiler alert, he likes it a lot, and it really highlights quite how limited the iPad is still in software, and that's like the main. He talks certainly about like the ports and the keyboard and the trackpad and stuff like that, but mainly the limitation on the iPad has always been software limitations, things like multitasking ability, and App Store rules, and inability to hook into certain behaviors, and inflexibility in certain areas. It's standard stuff that we know from iOS usage and iOS power usage in particular. And so it was jaw-dropping, and I think that article should serve as a serious wake-up call to the iPad OS team, that like things are bad if your biggest enthusiast just stopped using your platform for the last few months and kind of liked it better not using it.
Or it should be a wake-up call to the Mac team, because it's not clear to me from that article whether he would be happier if iOS gained all the abilities the Mac had, or if, as he actually said explicitly in the article, what if the Mac was more like the Surface, where you could take a laptop and bend the screen back and now it's a tablet and you can use a pencil on it, but it's also a Mac. And so like, who is closer? Which platform is actually closer to what VTG wants? I think actually the Mac is closer, especially now that it can run iPad apps. Not that Apple particularly seems to want to go in that direction, but there's an example. Microsoft goes in that, their OS is very different, but hardware-wise, they have a product line that does that, and people use it and like it. There is no reason the Mac couldn't do that, and the Mac is way closer to doing that than iPad is. The iPad is so far, it would have to add so much more stuff to get to where the Mac already is, whereas the Mac it already has the ability to run iPads. It just needs to add touch, a little bit of different window management, pen support, and then hardware design where, it's more like a Surface. You got an attachable screen, a fold backable screen, all that stuff. I don't think Apple's going to do that, but it was an interesting perspective reading his article and saying he kind of wants a Microsoft Surface running macOS that can run iPad apps.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll save most of that for another day, because, I want to talk about more of these OSs, but certainly, it highlights just how limiting iPad OS is when you try to do non-trivial things with it the way he always does. And he's always been really good at, like, if there is a way to do something, he will find that way, and he will make, sometimes very, ridiculous towers of hacks to try to get stuff to work the way he wants to on iPad OS. But really, iPad OS as a pro usage platform has always been very limited appeal. Has always been fairly difficult to, because similar to Swift UI, when you hit a wall, you hit it hard. And sometimes the process of getting over that wall, the answer is either you literally can't do that, or, well, you can do that. It's going to require, hacks X, Y, and Z to do it. And, you might actually not want to do that in the first place. So I hope to see some movement in iPad OS, because we really didn't see anything last year there. But at the same time, I'm not hopeful. I think iPad OS is lost, and I don't see any signs that they have found their way yet. And I don't, as John was just saying, I'm not even sure they can find their way in the paradigm they've made for themselves to make it anything other than what it is right now. And what it is right now, what the iPad is and what it does for people right now is not zero. It has plenty of value to plenty of people, but I don't think they're going to ever be able to push it into a place where it's more of a power user platform in the way we think of as Mac power users, like not the podcast, the concept. I don't think it can be pushed in that direction, but we'll see. If there's anything in that direction, this or next week. But again, I'm not expecting much there.
Since we're talking about this article, may I read for you my favorite part of the article?
Yeah, please.
The iPad is the only Apple computer that can transform from a tablet into a laptop. It's the only portable computer with built-in 5G connectivity, which I miss every day on the MacBook Pro. Welcome to the club, Federico. Oh, my gosh.
Again, Macs are really close to that. It just, it's using the same chip. A lot of them, you can just throw that right in there anytime you want, Apple.
One of us. I really enjoy my iPad. I'm still running the 2018 iPad Pro, the first one with Face ID. And by and large, it still works well. And I had a thing I had to do today, and I'm working on a keynote presentation for something that's uninteresting. And I was doing that on the iPad. Like, I was using Keynote on the iPad, and it was clunkier for me than using it on the Mac because I don't know where anything is. I don't know how to accomplish things, but I was able to do what I needed to, in a place that looked nothing like a place that you would want to do work. And I was able to do that. And that's super cool. And I was able to do that. I happen to be on Wi-Fi, but I could have used, 5G or the LTE the features of the iPad if I wanted to. Like, the iPad is just like SwiftUI, as you said. The iPad is really, really, really great until it isn't. And man, is it frustrating when it isn't. But hopefully it'll get better.
So moving on to what I actually have the most hopes for. So, well, before I get there, one thing I have low hopes for, and I hope they don't exceed it too much, is macOS. Because again, like, I think Apple has shown, like, when they tackle major macOS projects recently, they don't usually do a great job of it. They don't put a lot of time and effort into it to make it really high quality and really bug-free and stable. When they've tackled design changes in macOS recently, they've done kind of a two-thirds assed job of it. I would love to see them fix notifications. Like, the design of notifications still is awful on macOS since Big Sur, and they didn't touch it at all last year, it seems. I hope they fix that. Other than that, I want them to stop touching it until they get better at touching it. And I'm not sure that will ever happen, so please stop touching it. Moving on to
oh my word,
where I'm hoping to see the most progress is watchOS. This is, and in part because watchOS is still a very limiting factor in what I can do with my app, and in part because as a user, I want so much more there. watchOS is the youngest platform of all of these still, and it still feels like the youngest. It is still the most constrained. It is still a minefield for developers to try to achieve anything. I still get emails and one-star reviews and tweets every single day that what it really boils down to is watchOS is preventing my app from being good and from even functioning at certain basic levels that my customers expect to function. And that would be in things like the ability to do background downloading reliably, the ability to execute and update in the background on a consistent schedule and somewhat reliably, the ability to have a complication maybe that would be a little more dynamic and have less throttling and fewer limits on it. That's what I want to see from watchOS. And as a user, I would love to see something to get me closer to custom watch faces, whether it's actual custom watch faces, which I would love, but I think I've been burned so often on that hope that I don't even hope for it anymore because I don't want to lose. But something that gets me closer to that. So maybe it's one large complication that takes up, maybe you have the digital time in the top right quadrant, and the whole bottom 2/3 of it are one giant complication. We almost got that with the Series 7 last fall, but we didn't quite get that. I think so. So just some way that we can get a little bit closer to custom watch faces. If we're not going to actually have custom watch faces, that would be great. More abilities for complications to be more dynamic. Working in more SwiftUI technologies there, more timeline views in various places, things like that. But ultimately, in general, I want watchOS to allow my app to do more things that customers expect it to be able to do. And that would especially be in the area of background downloads and background execution.
John, what do you want to do on your Apple Watch that you can't do currently?
And maybe I want to do Apple. Did I tell you? Oh, that's some follow-up we should have added. Late time follow-up. Last show we talked about Apple Fitness Plus and like how they don't need the 4x3 things because no one's watching Apple Fitness Plus on a 4x3 TV. And then lots of people sent feedback and said, yeah, but what about the iPad? The iPad's 4x3 and people watch Apple Fitness Plus on the iPad. So there you go. That's why they need the 4x3 things. And I said, you know what? Let me check it on iPad to see what it does. Does it actually fill the 4x3? Does it letterbox or whatever? So I go pick up my iPad, which is like I think the most recent model, yes, the M1 iPad Pro. I pick up my iPad. I'm like, all right, pull down FIT. Well, it's not finding it. Do I not have fitness installed? I go to the App Store, Launch App Store, FITNE, what? And it's showing me ads and other apps called fitness something. I'm like, no, I want that's where it is, right? It's an Apple Fitness app. So I Google to use Apple Fitness Plus, use the fitness app, and it shows the one with the little activity rings. I'm like, yeah, it's the activity ring thing. So then I'm like, oh, is it in the app library? Why is it not finding it? I'm scrolling, there's a whole problem with Find on iOS and iPadOS where you can search for an app even when you find it. You're like, but show me where it is. On what screen is it and what folder is it buried in? I hate that so much because, yeah, you can launch it, but you'll never tell you where it is. Anyway, I'm not finding it. I can't launch it anywhere. So I go back to either a Mac, I forget what it was. I'm in a web browser. I find a link that says how to use Apple Fitness Plus. Go here to download the fitness app. And so it's like a link from a web page that I'm like, all right, well, this will launch me into the App Store. So I open that link on my iPad. I think I messaged it to myself or something. I don't know. Anyway, open link on the iPad. It brings you to an App Store page that says Fitness Plus and says, sorry, your iPad doesn't have the features that would allow this app to be installed on it.
What?
What?
So not only do I not have the fitness app, this is me just trying to see what Apple Fitness Plus, which I pay for, by the way, because I pay for Apple One, see what it looks like on an iPad. Not only do I not have the app on my iPad, I can't find the app in the App Store. It won't even show me the product page. And when I get a direct link to the Apple Fitness Plus product page, it says your iPad doesn't have the features to allow this to be installed. And it's at that point that I realized, wait a second, does Apple Fitness Plus not work if you don't have an Apple Watch?
Yep.
So to answer your question, what features of your non-existent watch would you like to have? I'd like to be able to at least launch the Apple Fitness app without an Apple Watch. Yeah, no, I don't have an Apple Watch, Apple paired with this thing at all. I understand that. So I never did get the answer to that question. I have to ask you, Casey, if you launch Apple Fitness Plus on the iPad, does it display 4x3 or is it 16:9 letterboxed?
I don't have my iPad near me. I want to say it's 16:9. If you'll permit me to go and run downstairs and come back in a moment, I can figure this out, or we can talk about it next week. But I just don't have the iPad in this room, and I apologize.
Yeah, and I don't have anything against WatchOS and Apple Watch. In fact, my wife's told the story to my wife. She said, well, she just got a Series 7, so she's got, I think, a Series 6 or a Series 5 that nobody's using in the family. So, well, you can have that watch, but of course, I don't wear an Apple Watch, not out of spite, because I think it's a bad product. I just don't like having a thing on my wrist, which is kind of a barrier for a watch, right?
Yep.
But maybe I'd just put it on for workouts or something. I haven't actually gone into Fitness Plus. But everything Marco said about making the OS more amenable to the type of apps that third-party developers would like to do, like having a podcast app on your watch that can do the things that you would expect a podcast app to do, like download a podcast and let you listen to it, would be amazing. But it's an uphill struggle and not really, the user experience is bad, the developer experience is bad, the product is just not quite there yet. So I feel like the APIs will probably expand, slightly lagging with the hardware. Like we just finally got the always on screens. Eventually we'll have enough surplus battery life, I hope, to be able to do things like, here is a straightforward, reliable API to download a file, then we won't kill your application after 2 seconds.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like in early WatchOS development, this has been a story arc for the entire history of WatchOS. In the beginning, users expected watch apps to be able to have interfaces that worked at all, and we couldn't, because WatchKit was awful, and it was doing the whole remote to your phone thing. And even when it moved the extension onto the watch a couple of versions in, it still sucked, and it was still laggy and weird and awful and limited. And then we, eventually over the long term, SwiftUI came in and fixed that. In the audio playback area in particular, for a while, we couldn't really do good background audio solutions. Like, they were buggy and limited and sucked, and like that was preventing us from doing basic podcast and media apps that people would expect to happen. That has since been solved, fortunately. So that's pretty much done. I have a couple of minor little wish list things there, but they're minor. For the most part, I can do what I want to do. And then now we have the more specialized things. If you want to have an app that you launch and you're using it actively and you close it and that's it, and there's no real background update needs for it, that's pretty well covered now. But now people expect your app also, if you're going to have something like a podcast app or anything that has background updates for its data, you expect that to be reliable. You expect to be able to have a complication update on a regular basis, not be bugged out. I mean, geez, even as a user, like I mentioned a while back when they launched the Apple Watch SE and family setup, I mentioned that we got one for our son, and that is his primary mobile iOS device. Like he has an iPad at home and on trips and stuff, but like when he's out and about, like playing at the playground or whatever, he has his Apple Watch as his only device. He doesn't have a phone yet. And if we want to like locate him or message him or have him message us, so anything that uses the GPS or the cellular, which we pay for and is part of advertised features of family plans, like that works about 85% of the time. And sometimes with the Apple Watch cellular, and I've actually seen this on mine and on my wife's watches as well, so it isn't just a family setup thing. Sometimes the cellular on the Apple Watch just doesn't work. You just don't get messages delivered to you, and you can't be located, and it just doesn't work until you reboot the watch.
Cool.
And so it's parts of watchOS, they're so creaky, and I'm sure this is somehow related to some background daemon being throttled or crashing or something. Like the platform just needs so much more maturation and advancement. And like, when we were asking, 3 hours ago what I wanted on iOS, like my list is so much shorter on iOS and it's so much more abstract. Like, let's make Swift UI better. But that wasn't really about iOS as much as about Swift UI, because iOS is so mature and so stable and has so much development happening for it over the last, 15, 14 years, whatever it's been, that like, there's not much more to wish for there. They've done a really good job and it's very mature. Whereas watchOS, some of the basics still don't work very well. And that's why like I was very excited when I heard, I think it was from Mark Gurman's newsletter like last week, that there are allegedly pretty big changes to watchOS happening, and that makes me very, very happy. Because even if we don't get a lot of flashy user-facing features like custom watch faces, any kind of large improvements to the underlying stuff behind the scenes, the APIs, the background, restrictions, and even just the OS itself being updated in big ways, is badly needed on watchOS, much more so than the other platforms. So that's what I'm excited for, in short.
Yeah, I think that all sounds great. And I don't know, I like my Apple Watch a lot. There's not a ton I wish from it, other than, as with all Apple platforms, like you're saying, stability and, just do what I want you to do when I want you to do it. And even for the things that you're supposed to be able to do. So I totally hear you. tvOS is something that I use all the time. I don't have anything specific I feel like I want from it, but I will say that tvOS is another one of the situations where it feels like, does anyone at Apple use this? Like, is this, and Merlin said this 1,000 times, and he's right. Like, does anyone at Apple really use tvOS or use it to watch anything other than Apple TV? Well, actually, even the Apple TV Plus stuff, it's such a pain in the hindquarters trying to find anything. But does anyone use this for real? Really? Do any of you use this? Same thing with Apple Music. Like, does anyone at Apple actually use Apple Music? Because it could be so much better, and it isn't, and it's frustrating. But
let me give you this. You've invoked the tvOS spirits, and now I have to give my most recent annoyance with tvOS.
Yes, please.
The same story you've heard me say a million times, but here's a concrete example. Watching Severance with someone who hasn't seen it before. I've seen it before, but I've wanted to see it, so we're going back through it. And you watch an episode, and then the next day, let's watch the next episode. So you launch TV, and then up next, you see a little icon on the left that says Severance. Great, the system is finally working. Up next is showing me the thing I just watched. I mean, it's not on the top left, but, I can still see it. It's above the fold. I can see it on the screen. I don't have to scroll. Well, let me just go down to Severance. But, of course, it shows you a little thumbnail, and there's always the question, were we on episode 3 or were we on episode 4? I don't know. Well, surely tvOS knows. Surely, probably whatever it is probably going to be the episode that we want to do. But for whatever reason, it picked the wrong episode. It was clear when it was showing us scenes like, no, we've seen this one already. From that screen, you launch TV Plus. Up next, you go into the left tile. Like, I want to go back to the episode list of Severance. But if you hit back, you're just back on that home screen again, and you see your up next thing. How do you get to the episode list for Severance? I don't know. That hierarchy just doesn't exist. I can go back into that same episode. I could scrub to the end and then go to the next episode. But it's like, is there no way to get to, oh, this is the wrong episode of Show X. Take me to the list of episodes for Show X so I can see them all and their titles and maybe little progress bars of how far I've done in them or something like that. It's just not rocket science. TiVo was doing this ages ago. I hate it so much. And then my second mini rant is I kind of like the new way that they expose like turning captions on and off in tvOS, like above the like scrubber bar. There's a bunch of little controls. They're like, hey, we have all this room on the screen. Let's put some controls. But for the life of me, I have no idea how they expect you to get at those controls. I eventually get at them sometimes by flailing my thumb on the touchpad in random directions. But like, what do they want from you to get to that? It's like, is it up, but not uppy up, because that takes you to the top, but not down, but it's like up and to the right, but just like, and there's no cursor, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Do you know what I'm talking about? The little caption bubble that's like above the scrubber line now, and Apple TV Plus native player control.
Yep. You have to swipe up a couple times, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, but like what is like? I always think like, did the first time not work, or is it just taking a hint, or I just have to like, Simon Says go up to the thing, and is it to the right? They haven't figured it out yet. Like, if this interface was like a menu system for a video game, every review would trash it.
Yep, agreed. So yeah, tvOS, just start using it, Apple, and make it cool. That'd be great. And then I guess Reality OS, if it's a thing, just sign me up. Let's see what you got.
I mean, there's a downside for them calling it that. I know it's like the code name and it's all over the code and everything, but like, if this thing has any problems whatsoever, let alone if it's a flop, there's a lot of jokes related to Reality OS that are going to come sailing down on Apple's head. So,
do you think like distortion field related or other?
The reality of this OS ain't so great. ROS maybe is a little bit better, but I feel like they're really running this lowercase letter OS thing into the ground.
Yeah. It's our OS. That's what it is. It's not our OS. It's our OS.
Oh, it's definitely not going to be ours. Believe me.
No.
Yeah, right.
Seeing the list written out here. Do you remember when they redid this branding? Like, oh, I know you don't like Mac OS, all lowercase MAC, but like it matches in the family. But seeing this list here, what stands out to you as the ugly duckling in many ways?
iPad and TV.
iPad, because it's like, well, it starts with lowercase. Technically, yeah, but capital P. None of the other ones do that. It's like iOS gets around it by just having the I, but iPad OS goes right to the capital P in the second letter. It's supposed to just be the OS that's capital, but iPad is always lowercase I, capital P. They kind of broke the pattern, and iPad OS is like kind of the black sheep of this family too, and it's just...
I would say, I know everyone's sick of everyone's iPad hot takes since Federico's article came out, but I mean, I would say I don't think they've lived up to separating that out into its own name. I think it should still be called iOS because the iPad has not been significantly separated from the iPhone, and it still has all the same limitations. So it might as well just be called iOS.
Yeah, on this show, we call it iOS all the time. Every once in a while, we'll remember, oh yeah, iPad OS should be a separate thing. But if it really was distinct, I don't think we'd have such a problem remembering it.
Yeah, but the reality is calling it iPad OS was seemingly purely a marketing effort and not really reflecting enough diversion from iOS to really earn that name.
Yeah. All right, so we don't think we're getting a headset. Are we getting an M2 MacBook Air?
That's another round of like late breaking rumors of like, the redesigned MacBook Air is surely coming at some point. It's conceivable that it could be announced at WWDC, but this whole noise around the M2, and it's like, well, it's not. The real M2 is coming next year, and this is just going to be like an M1 Plus, but Apple might call it M2, and just like last minute massive confusion / taking back things that the rumors were so strong and everyone was on the same page until like a week before the conference, and everyone's like, wait, no, we were totally wrong, forget it, I don't know what's going on.
That's exactly what happened.
It totally did. Like, they're like, it's not M1 Plus? What? Like, just get your story straight, people. Like, geez, I mean, I still do believe that the MacBook Air rumors are probably pretty dead on. We didn't see, like we did with the MacBook Pros, like what turned out to be a totally accurate leak of like the drawings of the case from that ransomware attack or whatever, but I totally believe the redesigned MacBook Air rumors, and honestly, I don't care if it has an M1 Plus or an M2, or if they call something that's an M1 Plus, they call it M2. Like, the MacBook Air is not hurting for performance, right? It's not, no one's saying, oh, MacBook Air, it's so slow. It's a great machine. If they put it in a slightly different form factor that maybe has one or two more ports or is better in some ways or has a better screen, yeah, even if they give it a notch. Like, I mean, I feel like it'll the MacBook Air as probably still Apple's best-selling laptop for a very good reason. It deserves to sort of take the leap into the new form factors. The MacBook Pro's got it there, and the new form factor, everybody loves it. It's different, it's quirky, it's got a notch. Like, do it to the MacBook Air. I really don't care what CPU has in it. That is this is not what Apple should be concentrating on, but my biggest hope for WWDC is new MacBook Air announcement. I'm setting aside the Mac Pro because I can't even think that they're going to do anything about that. So I'm setting that totally aside. Obviously, I'd be way more excited about that, but I really don't think it's going to happen. And tease of a Mac Pro, is that a thing that Apple does? I don't even freaking know. But anyway, MacBook Air, a redesigned MacBook Air. I hope that is announced and released, and I hope it is available for me to purchase for my son when he goes off to college in the fall.
Yeah, I think that's actually, we've heard the rumors about the MacBook Air, the M2 MacBook Air, have been all over the map for the last year, really. It was originally supposed to come out this past spring. That didn't happen. And as John expressed better than I can, the rumors have been very turbulent recently about the MacBook Air, and in particular any M2 based,
what's inside it,
right? And any M2 based product. Where is the M2 chip? What is it like? Even like what TSMC process?
What is the M2?
Yeah. What process is it based on? What cores is it based on? Like this has now all been thrown up in the air with the rumor mill in the last few days. Even like it just seems like either the rumor mill was way off and they're now correcting themselves, or something went really wrong and something got delayed, and who knows?
Well, the COVID supply chain stuff is obviously still messing with things. Like, how long did I have to wait for my studio display? And that is not advanced technology. So like all of Apple's plans, like so many other companies' plans, are really getting screwed up. And you would think like, well, shouldn't you had those screw ups before? No, all the stuff that came out when COVID just started, that stuff, that ship had already sailed. Like the lag time on how long it takes hardware to go through. What we are seeing now, I feel like, is the real wreckage of COVID messing with stuff, because the pipeline was already filled with products that were going to come out pretty much no matter what. But now it's just, I don't really blame Apple for these. Like, it's kind of amazing that Apple's able to ship any new products at all, considering how hard it is to get basic stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, it feels like whatever's inside the new MacBook Air, it does feel like it's overdue, or at least due. But as John said, even if it is just the M1 in like a slightly modified form, for now, M1 plus, who knows what they would, M1.1, whatever they would call it, that's still amazing. And the only limitation of the current MacBook Air, really, I would say, having used one myself for a while and loving it, and then now using the newer things, is that the MacBook Air's enclosure, the physical enclosure, is outdated. Like that's the main downside to it. It doesn't have all the ports of the higher end ones, and we don't actually know that it will. It has the old screen shape, it has the old keyboard shape, it has the old Touch ID key and the old proportions of the function row. Like, it looks and feels outdated because it is a fairly old design now, and so that's the part that we're hoping they update. Is like, the physical side of everything, the enclosure, the shapes, the keyboards, the case, all that stuff. That's what we want them to update. Whether it has an M1 or an M2, whatever that means, inside of it, I think is barely relevant at all, honestly, for that product.
Yeah, well put.
And so that I hope that does come out soon. That being said, that is not necessarily a WWDC release. Usually in WWDC keynotes, they don't usually do consumer hardware like that unless there's, some really good reason, and maybe it's like a very light software year. But from the rumors, it sounds like it's not going to be that light of a software year, so they might not have time to do stuff like that. I think they can release that with standard press interaction in July, no problem. And so if they don't want that to take up space in WWDC, or if it isn't quite ready yet, that can wait. And if it doesn't hit July, then they'll do it in September or October or whatever. Like that, I think we're in the ballpark of that product being released, but when it will actually be released is kind of up in the air, and it kind of doesn't matter. As for the Mac Pro, I think it's pretty clear from the last event that they want to tease the new Mac Pro soon. I don't think we're going to be waiting another year for it. I don't even think we're going to be waiting until the winter for it. It might be the winter before we can get one, especially given current supply issues. But I'm guessing that the Mac Pro is formally announced at this event.
Oh, God.
And I don't know how much detail we're going to get, but I think it will be announced and shown in some way, and then said, we can order it this fall, something like that. That's what I would expect to happen.
My biggest nightmare is that they tease it and say almost nothing specific about it, and then we have to Zapruder, or however you pronounce it, that bad boy, for the next 6 friggin' months until we get answers. Please, Apple, don't do this to me. Don't do it. Please don't do it to me. Either nothing or just show us everything, because in the middle where these two have to go on for hours and hours and hours about it, please no. Please no.
Given how long it took me, like from the time I ordered my Mac Studio to get one, because I hesitated a little bit. Like if they announce a Mac Pro, I'm not ready to order the second it comes out, which means that if I eventually decided after a week of tour or having a hauling, I should probably order one of these, it's going to be like 6 months before I get it. Because if you thought trying to build all the parts that go in the Mac Studio is hard, whatever exotic stuff they have inside the Mac Pro is probably going to be worse. And yes, I know they sell far fewer of them, but it's shocking to me that the Mac Studio shipping delays are what they are, given how few people in the grand scheme of things are buying Mac Studios. Like the sales numbers for this weird little computer have to be like 1/20th what they are for the MacBook Air, or even worse than that. And it's still months to get it.
I'm still holding out hope that even though this is not something that I would probably buy, we still haven't seen a really tiny Apple Silicon laptop yet. Like there is no 12-inch or 11-inch, MacBook Air or whatever they would call it. That doesn't exist yet. I think it's very clear from both, first of all, from the 10-inch iPad or 11-inch iPad Pro, like that's an M1 product. Actually, no, even the 10 point whatever inch iPad Air is now an M1 product. So they can obviously fit this chip with a good battery and perfectly reasonable passive cooling. They can clearly fit that in much smaller enclosures. I think we've seen that the Magic Keyboard doesn't actually take up that much more physical space than the Butterfly keyboard that preceded it, which we will not talk about today because I'm happy. And so I think it's very clear that they could make a really nice, super compact laptop from the M series of chips if they wanted to. I'm kind of surprised they haven't yet. Before the M1 computers were announced, I was predicting they're going to come out the door with something super small as a statement. And then we were all kind of shocked when they just came out with the unmodified MacBook Air enclosure that just had, they basically deleted the fan and kept everything else the same. And it was an amazing computer, still is an amazing computer, but they haven't really blown the doors off in terms of what they can do physically with these new chips that we didn't already have a similar size class of before. So I would love to see something like that. I wouldn't say I necessarily expect it for this event, not only because, again, that wouldn't really be a WWDC thing, but also because we have heard absolutely zero rumors to that effect. And usually when they're announcing a new size of computer that has a display, we almost always get display leaks, months ahead of time from various, leakers and Ming Chi Kuo and things like that. So it doesn't seem like this is a thing they're actually doing, but that is one kind of unfilled spot in the lineup that I think if they tackled it now, today, with Apple Silicon and with their modern, having seen the light on the keyboard, I think they would do a really great job with it, and I think people would absolutely love that thing. Now, whether they would sell a lot of it is another question. What we heard kind of unofficially, the 12-inch MacBook, allegedly sales fell off a cliff when the Retina MacBook Air came out. And so, apparently when people, they love that little 12-inch thing, love asterisk, that little 12-inch thing, but as much as they hated it, they kept buying them. But they loved it. But as soon as the 13-inch MacBook Air came out that was much more capable and less compromised, they all moved to that, allegedly. So we'll see. Maybe this is a product that people think they want and then actually don't buy in enough volume to matter to Apple, like the iPhone mini. But I still think it would be cool to have that, and I think a lot of people would absolutely love that computer. So we'll see.
Now, that would make me at least consider doing the desktop laptop / laptop lifestyle that you're doing right now, because even though I don't feel like I have any need for a new MacBook adorable in my life. I loved that thing so much. It was such a piece of trash, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And so that would make me think about getting it as like a satellite machine. But
yeah, it's so fun for that. Like I saw somebody the other day, maybe this is why I'm thinking of it. I saw somebody the other day using an 11-inch MacBook Air. First of all, I loved seeing the light up Apple logo on the lid.
Yeah,
that was like, I missed that.
too.
But you know, I saw it and I was like, wow, that is still, you know, the 11-inch MacBook Air came out in 2010, and that is still 12 years later a strikingly small computer.
Yeah.
Like when you see it in person, and it really had very few compromises. The 11-inch Air was way less compromised than the 12-inch MacBook. Way less. It had the regular keyboard mechanism. It had a regular trackpad. It had a lot of ports. It was full of ports. It had Thunderbolt. Like, it had a lot of stuff. It was actually a pretty great computer for what it was. It just had that really like squat screen. That was
the biggest compromise. Is you got to fit all your stuff in this little tiny, tank window into the world. It was. I think if you used one, like the bottom of the computer was pretty much no compromises, but that screen, I feel like that would be a tough sell in the modern age. People just want more screen space.
Oh yeah, but that screen bezel was so thick. You know, it was like a matted picture frame.
I know, but it's the proportions. Like, it's just not. macOS does not lend itself well to that environment, especially if they default the dock to the bottom. Ugh.
That's true. But, when the 12-inch took it a little bit more, closer to square, rather than being so squat. And I think if they bring back the 12-inch Air with modern design and modern hardware and modern choices, I think they would do a really great job with it.
Yeah. So, Marco, are you seeing a Mac Pro in this event or no?
Yeah. I said earlier, I expect them to announce it and to show off something about it, possibly full details, I don't know. But I expect them to at least announce it and tell us what the processor and card situation is there. I wouldn't expect to be able to buy it yet or to order it yet, and I would only expect to hear a base price.
Are they going to show it? As in, here's what shape the thing is?
Yeah, no, I would expect a full reveal of the thing, similar to when they did the trash can and the 2819 Mac Pro, where they announced it at WWDC, but then you couldn't actually buy it for a little while. I think it's going to be very similar to that.
What are you basing that on? The just rumors, or you think it's the time for this? Because I still think that's not going to happen at WWDC. I would love it, but it just doesn't seem like it's in the cards for me.
I think gut feeling. I mean, it does feel like it's about time. I mean, given their own stated timeline, which they've followed pretty closely for the Apple Silicon transition, they only have until November.
I mean, they did tease it at the end of the last thing, so
right.
I think they would like to do it now, but I don't know if it's just with all of the stuff happening. It just, for me, my gut feeling is it feels like it's not time. But hey, prove me wrong, Apple. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, and again, I wouldn't expect to actually get one until like fall or winter.
Yeah.
But I think they will show it to us.
I just need enough to make a shirt, so I need to know what it looks like.
Yeah.
Which, quick aside, very, very late follow-up. Some people have been tweeting pictures of their shirts. Mine have not come in yet because I always order on the later side. I haven't forgotten yet because I use my techniques, but I always order on the later side, so I haven't seen mine yet. But the ones that I've seen photographed, they look real good, particularly the Interposer shirt. I'm real excited to get mine. So they're...
Yep, I got all mine too, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much fine detail. I was worried about the detail in the back with the big SoC for the Ultra shirt with the little things. I mean, I know I have the spec of like can't be smaller than this size or whatever, but all the detail that I wanted to showed up really well. So I mean, again, maybe it will fade with many washes or whatever, but right out of the box, it looks pretty darn good. So yeah, I got all mine.
Good deal. Well, I'm excited for next week. I really am. I'm sad that I'm not there. I mean, I understand it, but I'm sad about it. But I'm really stoked, and I'm really, really fascinated to hear reports, formal and informal, about what this looks like, what it looks like for press, what it looks like for regular schmoes that are just showing up, with permission from Apple, of course. Breaking news: apparently Gruber's doing the talk show, and it's being hosted by Apple, which is fascinating. Like, you actually sign up for a ticket lottery at apple.com, which is super, not bad weird, but weird, unusual maybe is a better word for it.
Yeah, it looks like the Developer Center is the venue.
Is that right? Okay, I missed that part.
There's free tickets for everybody. Someone should tell Apple that 30% of nothing is nothing.
Yeah, he said we are going to record it inside the Apple Developer Center. Seating will be, to say the least, limited. So this will be interesting to see, like, what is the capacity of whatever room they're in the Developer Center.
They're going to set up folding chairs? I don't know.
Is there a little theater in there, like the Steve Jobs Theater? I don't know.
Why doesn't he get to do it in the Steve Jobs Theater? No one else is using it.
I don't know. We'll find out.
Anyway, I'm so curious to hear about everything, and I'm really hopeful that come next year, I'm super reluctant to get on a plane right now, mostly on account of Michaela, not being eligible for vaccination yet. I'm hopeful by next year that I will be more willing, and that, maybe I'll get a ticket to the big show and be able to go and experience it again. And I am so jealous of anyone who is able to go. And I hope that if you're able to go, that you have a ton of fun, and let me, maybe not everyone, but maybe not, the other guys, but let me know what you think, because I'm curious to hear it.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Squarespace, Iodyne, and Hullo Pillow. I cannot wait to go put my head on my Hullo Pillow. I'm so tired. Thanks to our sponsors. And thank you to our members who support us directly. You can join us at atp.fm/join. And we will talk to you next week. We will be recording, hopefully, if it all goes to plan, on Monday, and hopefully releasing it late that night as soon as I'm done with the edit. So it'll be an exciting WWDC week. If you want it even faster, you should join atp.fm/join again. You should join to get the bootleg. Otherwise, it'll be probably a couple hours later. But yeah, we can't wait for next week, and we will talk to you then.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
John, I have a question for you. I think I stole this from somebody who tweeted about it or emailed about it, but it was a fascinating question that I'd like to hear the answer to. Are you sleeping more now?
No, I think we maybe answered it on Rectifs. All these podcasts blend together. Not really, because I'm setting my alarm for the exact same time I always set it for, because the kids are still in school, so I have to wake up and get everything ready and make sure everyone has breakfast. And I've been cooking breakfast for the kids every morning.
Tell me what the menu is.
It's mostly pancakes.
Pangea.
Pancakes, fruit, mixing it up with doing some experiments with the pancake mixtures and stuff like that. But yeah, mostly pancakes.
Do you have any micro horseradish on your menu?
I do not. But yeah, no, my sleep is about the same, which is to say probably still not enough because I'm still setting an alarm. But once summer comes, I'm hoping I'll be able to sleep in more.
That was my next question. Are you taking the summer off? So are you just sleeping until you wake up? Is that that's dangerous for you, because you wouldn't wake up till like 2.
Sleeping until I wake up? Come on. What universe is this? Do you have a family, Casey?
Well, I do.
Sleeping until I wake up. Maybe if the rest of my family and my dog left the house.
John, I haven't slept past 7:30 in like 10 years, so I'm not saying I'm living the dream.
Yeah, no, I'm not sleeping until I wake up. That's not a thing. Anyone considering having pets and or children and or a spouse, not really a thing. But no, hopefully I'll be able to sleep longer. The kids mostly sleep in, but the dog does not sleep in.
So Daisy's getting you up at what time?
And neither does my wife. Daisy wants to. Daisy will, if it's before 6. You can safely go to the bathroom and return to the bed. If it is after 6, you cannot.
Fair enough. Well, and are you napping at all?
No, I'm not a napper.
Yeah, I said that too, and that lasted like 6 months, and then suddenly I became a napper.
I don't think I'll ever be a napper until I'm so old that it's just I can't tell what day it is anymore, and it doesn't matter. But no, I don't
said that
do
too.
naps. I take a nap, and then I wake up, and it's like my entire life is ruined. I have no idea what's going on.
That used
What
to
planet
be
am I on? Is this
me.
real life? I'm just terrible. I just do not like it.